Hospital Porter's pride and dignity, stop the New World Order. Welcome to Herpanwo TV, and welcome to this. It's another Bases Project event, but right now I'm in Salisbury, a place I've never been to before, but it's very, very nice here. There's this lovely shallow river here, and there's this Wetherspoons pub. I've actually been staying there, and it's very, very nice. Beautiful weather, really, really warm, well, I'll tell you a little bit more about where I'm going. This is the event I'm going to go to. It is the Bases Project, Bases Project with the Freedom Network. It's a joint venture this time, presents Bases 2022 International Conference and Workshops. You're very, very familiar with the Bases Projects, I'm sure, and there's so much going on. The speakers, there's some really good speakers here. Even the ones who are not me are pretty good. Sandra de Roy, who's going to be talking, who's done several interviews before. Duncan Davis, interviewed by Gemma Cooper, that'll be interesting. Maria Wheatley, yes, and she's very good with Stonehenge. She was at, do you remember if she was at Blackpool? Kerry Cassidy, live from the Bases HQ. Yeah, Mountain Colburn, Kim Goguin, I've only just heard a little bit about her. She was on the Charlie Ward show. Andrea Fawkes, Matthew Williams, Michael Shrimpton, Sandy Asam, Karen Dodd, who's the co-organiser. Yeah, there's loads and loads of really good stuff coming here, and of course a great social life that goes with it, so I'm very, very much looking forward to this. As you're seeing what I'm seeing, we're in Salisbury. There's that clock tower thing there and the big spire, and there's not a cloud in the sky, there is not a chemtrail. It is complete. There's the King's Head Inn, which is where I've been staying, at Wetherspoons. It's a pub and a hotel where I've been staying, and it's literally cloudless and chemtrailless sky. We're now going to head for Pewsey and for the Bases Project conference starting. I'm doing my talk at 6:30 this evening. I'm glad to get it out of the way on a Friday evening. I can relax for the rest of the weekend, I'm sort of going to be mentally preparing myself for that and enjoying the rest of the conference with my friends from Wales. Right, ladies and gentlemen, we're just driving now towards Pewsey from Salisbury. We've been past RAF Boscombe Down. We just saw the runway lights, which went right past the runway lights there. And Boscombe Down is, of course, has several functions. It actually is a research and development centre for the Royal Air Force. It's very, very similar to Area 51 in the United States. It also is reputed to be a place where exotic material and debris is actually stored. It's actually stored and analysed. In other words,
in a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, take the second exit.
Come on, there we go. Alright, yeah, I'm just navigating here. Just keep going down to the left, that's it. Exotic material involving foreign technology, foreign material that's actually taken from in combat, in warfare, and also during peacetime through espionage. And exotic could include extraterrestrial. There's a lot of stories to do with Boscombe Down and of course Porton Down, which is nearby, which is a biological warfare facility. So obviously we couldn't get in there to have a look, but we saw the fence line, which was highly secure. We saw the runway lights, and we're going through Amesbury now.
In 300 yards at the roundabout, take the second exit and stay on Salisbury Road, A345.
We're heading towards Pewsey. We're probably going past Stonehenge soon. And we've arrived at the Bouverie Hall. A few clouds today with the flag there, and this, of course, here is the Bases stuff here, the Bases Project Film Festival. I don't think that was 2015, but look, it's all set up ready. I think they're just setting up everything inside, so... And that is Mr. Milesy. You can hear him a mile off, can't you? This chap, he was in the last trip I did. It's Taj!
Hello,
how are you, sir?
Yeah,
are you
I'm
well?
good.
And I'll be very surprised if you people have not heard of Mr. Colin Wolford.
Yeah. Hello, everyone.
Or Colon, as some people call him. The alien autopsy extraordinaire.
Thank you.
Yeah, but it's great to be here, isn't it? In lovely weather. Yeah. There are still no chemtrails, but there's a few white clouds. Oh, there's a plane, but it's not chemtrailing. So we've got a few planes and white clouds and beautiful weather. We'll hopefully get a lot of people out today. I'll show you my stall in a minute. Things are just setting up in there. Miles is usual, rushing around like a tsunami. I'm not going to disturb a master at his game, so hopefully I'll get an interview with him later though. Breaking news, guys. Apparently, I've just heard the Prime Minister of Japan has died. I don't know any more details at this time. Apparently it's just happened. It's funny because like only yesterday, Boris Johnson, our unfearless leader, agreed to resign, and they want to get him out as soon as possible. He said he might stay on for a few months until there's a replacement, but the rest of them are saying, no, kick him out and let the Deputy Prime Minister take over and things like that. So basically, lots going on in the world. Obviously, like, I've already put up a notice for a live stream I'm going to do as soon as I get back about all the things that are going on in the world. Yes, CERN has restarted. There's the Georgia Guidestone's been blown up, things like that. It seems like a very dynamic time period at the moment. And quite weird, very, very strange, I think. So, who knows what will happen by Monday? We'll see. Colin here is getting ready. We'll start a bit late starting as usual. It's always happens with Miles. With Miles' conference, you just got to let it happen when it happens. But people are already crowded into the seats, and everything's sort of been set up here at the back. Oh my goodness! Look at the size of that. I've got camera envy again. And I'll show you my stall. I'll give you a little quick shot along here, as you can see. Hey, I'm fine, thanks, Sandra. Yeah, really good to be here.
Yeah, very good.
It's great to be. Oh, thanks. Likewise.
Yeah.
You're on first, aren't you?
Well, I'm very tired. I'm not good at these things.
Oh, right. Oh, well, look forward to it.
Thank you.
Take care. Thanks. You too. And so we go along here, and we're getting ready to get some stalls here. So there's you can order tea and coffee from there. That's the gallery where all the masterwork happens. There is Monsieur Williams, another master at his work, and there is Mr. Bassist himself, Miles Johnston, setting up, getting ready. Lovely. I'll just show you my stall here. This is my stall. I've got my books set up. I decided not to do the discount thing. £10 each. And here, see, that is Tina Bird's. I've got one of those signed things. That's Tina Bird's new book. And you've seen these other things. I showed you these things. I remember I showed you these things at Blackpool, and there's the back cover of Tina Bird's. That is actually the QR code if you want to learn more. And I'm now selling these books here for £10 each. Not a penny more, not a penny less.
Is we're going to do a jubilee because Queen Elizabeth has just had hers, isn't she? So we want one on the 10th of September. We're going to call it Debt-Free Jubilee, and it's literally we just have this idea. So a bunch of us are getting together. We're going to create.
It's just started. That's Karen Dodds, co-organiser. Okay, well the first speaker has been on. It was Sandra de Roy, and she gave a long talk, and I couldn't follow all of it. How you doing? All right?
Yeah.
All right, thanks. Yeah.
And you were having a bit of sleep there.
Well, I couldn't help it. I was just dropping off. Yeah, I couldn't help it. It's just... And she talked about experiences of meeting like a man in black type character. This was like when she was near St. Petersburg, and a long time ago, and she was driving, and she came across this man in black type character. He was a weird bald guy with like weird no hair or anything, and no eyebrows and things like that. And also, she says that some of the homeless people in cities are actually not human. I couldn't follow everything she said. She put so much information in. I couldn't get all of it. I was very drowsy, as I always am at conferences. But she talked about archons and about where they come from, and about how some people, like nurses, she described that nurses sometimes have like they talk like robots, and they don't seem to have any empathy. I've known a few nurses, and I think that's true. Not all of them, though. I mean, it's nurses like most other people. And she says that the sun is a machine built by these other creatures, and stars everywhere. And this is the chemtrails are there to buy the bad guys some time, the archons some time. She talked about this numerology, like the 66 2022, which is a 666 number, which is gone now. And there's 7 2023, 8 2024. It all adds up to like triple numbers. And it was hard to follow all of it, but she talked about 35, 36 and 37 degree Freemasons. So there's like degrees above the 33 degrees. People like Prince Philip, the Queen, these people. But it was a long, detailed talk, and I think she had an awful lot more she wanted to say. And if she'd had more time, she would have said probably more. But it was Miles had to pull her short for the time, but. she was very intense. She was very animated. It was like she was almost channeling a large amount of information that was coming through her, and she was almost panting for breath. This is definitely like a, what's the word? It was definitely a kind of it was like that. I felt intense energy coming off her, quite overwhelming. Yeah. Oh, we had a lovely lunch break. Oh, we're now heading back to the venue. Now, I filmed this bit before, months ago for the last conference, and it was all dark. Do you remember we were walking through this place and it was dark and it was raining at night because there was a shortcut back to the venue. Yet, there's Tad just slightly ahead of me there. But now it's sunny, it's hot. It's actually really very warm indeed today. It's really, as you can see, we came the long way around. But the next speaker will be up in a few minutes. Right, there's old Colbahar. There he is, old Colin there.
Everybody take your seats now. We're shortly commencing our afternoon session
Bill
of the
Wood.
Basis 2022 conference. Miles is just dusting the set.
It looks like Colin is going to do an interview with Bob Wood, which should be good. Bob Wood is one of the biggest conference organisers of the major American scene, so I think this is going to be extremely interesting. Colin, of course, has been a speaker on the American scene several times, so I'm very much looking forward to this.
Just a very
Should be
quick
good.
important announcement before we begin. Anybody during this afternoon, obviously Miles is filming this, so please do not come this side. If you need to leave, go round to the toilet, please exit via the back entrance and round that way. Please do not come across the all-important stage. Thank you very much. So we had a fabulous morning, kicked off with Sandra de Roy, an incredible journey, and now we are very lucky to have Bob Brown, all the way from the States, who is the co-founder of the UFO International Conference. Bob?
Yes, that's true.
As well as UFO MegaCon, and he's going to be introduced and interviewed by Colin Wolford.
Yay.
So welcome them both to the stage. I shall hand you over, Colin, over to you.
Thank you.
The end of the world, but not as we know it. Emlyn-Jones.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Now, Miles has given me specific instructions for this particular event. I am on no account to mention the R word. Now, the R word actually refers to a town in New Mexico, USA. And now, 75 years ago today, on the 8th of July, I'm only going to briefly disobey him, don't worry. This isn't some kind of shock new presentation. But just for a couple of minutes, I'm going to defy him. On the 8th of July 1947, the local newspaper in that area published a certain news story about a flying saucer being captured. I don't know if you remember that, but it was 75 years ago today. So, with no further ado, got to be careful not to disturb the mic. Whoops. Oops. Oh, I have. No. Don't worry, Martin.
You alright?
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Happy World Disclosure Day! Are you having a good time? Thank you all for coming. You're enjoying yourselves? Great, let's talk about the end of the world. Before you go any further, I've got to mention the R word once again, because I am the author of the book Roswell Rising, a Novel of Disclosure, and its two sequels, which does cover, well, it's not just about Roswell and UFOs and all the things I'm not supposed to talk about. It's about all the issues we talk about in the Basis Project community, and it's based on the question, what would happen if we got the truth instead of the lies? And this idea led to a fictional scenario, because I'm a fiction author. I've written 2 novels before this, which led to a story, which eventually became these books. And that's my website as well. I'll get that out of the way now, Hospital Porters Against the New World Order. If you go there, you'll find all kinds of things that will interest you if you enjoy this conference. So, as they say on Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, last orders, please. What is the apocalypse? What is this idea of the end times, the end of the world? what exactly is it? I mean, everyone has their own idea, but I don't think there's many people on earth who have no concept of it at all. I'm going to argue that it is a universal archetype, some kind of upwelling of Jungian unconscious, which relates to some real event. It's a concept that relates to a real event. It's not just an illusion. But the most well-known, that the original, I think, in Western culture, where the Messiah, the idea of the Messiah, the end times, the new era, the apocalypse, catastrophe, revelation, can be found in Judaism. The idea of the Messiah. The Messiah means the anointed one, and the anointed one is the king of the Jews. It is an individual who's related to the bloodlines of King Solomon and King David, who would unite the tribes of Israel, and therefore create a new era on earth, a new age, a new era of plenty, of happiness. And it is a religious idea. This person is essentially a divine being, but not in the same way as Christians regard the Messiah. And indeed, when you get into Christianity, the concept of the apocalypse becomes far more complicated, because it actually involves Jesus as the Messiah. He's called the Messiah, yet not in the same way as the Jews believe the Messiah would be. The Jews have this idea. I read the definitions. I read exactly. This is from Isaiah 11:6-9. The wolf will lie down with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the goats, the calf and the lion and the yearling, the cow will feed with the bear, the lion shall lie down with the lamb, they will neither harm nor destroy on the holy mountain, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord. That is the Jewish concept which would follow the arrival on earth of the Messiah. You may have seen the famous film by Monty Python. He's not the Messiah, he's a naughty boy. And all loads of people pretending to be the first coming. You know, there's plenty of people pretending to be the second coming, but there are a few, even to this day, mostly Jewish, who believe they are the first coming. And Christianity, as I say, is far more complicated, because Jesus is not the Jewish Messiah in the sense that you read in the text like the book of Isaiah. He is literally the embodiment of God. He is the Son of God, God made man. And born to a virgin on the 25th of December. You hear that a lot, don't you, all over the world. And that the Messianic age would be one which would, the idea that he was designed to be rejected. He was destined, the prophecy was that he would be despised and rejected. And then what would follow after that would be surely the most dynamic concept in theology. That is the second coming, the tribulation, the rapture. Again, there's been a huge amount of cultural influence with this. Films, books, movies, TVs, ideas, people believing they are the second coming of Jesus, things like that. And what would follow would be what is described in the book of Revelations, which is by far the most interesting book of the Bible. And it's what you hear in the book of Revelations is many, many things. But there was one very interesting word, Armageddon. What is Armageddon? Because Armageddon is used many, many times. You may have heard nuclear Armageddon, climate Armageddon, electronic Armageddon. I mean, it means a complete disaster, a breakdown of life and society on Earth. But Armageddon is actually a place. It's this place. This is Harmageddon, which is the actual proper name for it. Armageddon is a Greek corruption. It's a tourist attraction and an archaeological site. It's in northern Israel, and this is the place where the armies of light and darkness in the book of Revelation, of God and the devil, are destined to fight in the last fight before the great ending. And the end is, you may have seen people wearing these kinds of sandwich boards, black placards. There's all kinds of ideas about this. Many, many people for a long, long time have been predicting that the end is nigh. It was supposed to be the year 2000 because it was the second Gregorian millennium. And indeed, in the first millennium, the Pope stood in the middle of Rome in the year 1000 and put his hands up like that, waiting to be assumpted into heaven, but nothing happened. Nothing happened. Because in Mark 13:32 it says, "But about that day or hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. But I'm going to tell you something, this is going to amuse you. A lot of people think they know. This is St. Malachi. Now, St. Malachi was an Irish bishop in the 12th century. And he went on a pilgrimage to Rome, where he had a vision in which an angel told him that there will be 111 popes, and then the church would fall, and the end times would begin. I'm going to put this hat on, actually. I'm wearing a hat which says, this says Roswell, 75 years of secrecy, 1947. Back on topic, Ben, back on topic. St. Malachi had this vision, 111 popes after 111 popes after the present one, and the church would fall, the end times would begin. Anyone want to have a guess? Who is the 111th pope after St. Malachi's time? It's Francis. It's the current pope. That means that when this pope is gone, I hear he's thinking of quitting. There may be a second papal abdication in a row, which is unprecedented. Presumably then the end times will begin. Alright, so we're going to talk about Islam. Now, when you come onto Islam, you'll find that the ideas of the tribulation and the second coming and the apocalypse it's even more complicated than the Christian version. Because they do also believe in the second coming of Jesus, or as they call him, Isa ibn Maryam. But the arrival of Jesus on earth to do final battle with Satan would be preceded by what they call the Mahdi. The Mahdi would be the Redeemer of Islam, the final Imam. And this is a guy called Mirza Guzman Ahmad. In 1858, he declared that he was the Mahdi. And he developed a large number of followers. And indeed, the Ahmadiyya community, it's called, still exists. It has a very upmarket website, actually, and millions of adherents all over the world still believe that Ahmad was the Mahdi. Now, this guy died in 1908, and Isa ibn Maryam never appeared during his lifetime, so I don't know exactly how they worked that out. But what would happen is that Jesus would do battle, that what would emerge on earth would be the Antichrist in the form of a fake Messiah. It's called Messiah ad-Dajjal, literally the fake Messiah. And so that Jesus would do battle with the Messiah ad-Dajjal. Now you come on to Hinduism and many other religions, similar religions, you have a very different notion. Rather than history being purposive and leading up to an appointed end in a linear fashion from creation to apocalypse, they believed in interconnecting cycles known as yugas, and there were also larger ones as well. There were super yugas with different names, so a number of yugas would make up I don't know what the word is, this word's like kalpa, which I'll describe in a moment. But these cycles would be eternal, yet when one yuga transferred to the other, when one yuga ended and another began, you would have an apocalypse-like event. It would be very, very similar to what is described in the book of Revelations. This here is Krishna, an image of Krishna, the Saviour God, who again played a similar role to Jesus or to the Mahdi. In Buddhism adopted many of the ideas of Hinduism, and indeed they believe that each apocalypse would be preceded by what they call the Maitreya, the future Buddha. Now we all know about Prince Siddhartha. He was the original Buddha. In the 25th century he became the person we know as the Buddha. But there are many, many other Buddhas. They're estimated to be 10,000 Buddhas per kalpa. So that sounds like an awful lot, doesn't it? You can imagine there's Buddhas raining down from the sky all the time. 10,000 per kalpa, they're everywhere. That is until you realise that a kalpa is a very long period of time. It's actually, well, there's several different kalpas, but the longest kalpa, the one referred to in the ideas of the Maitreya, is 4.7 trillion years. Not billion, trillion years. So you do the maths, you work out exactly how often would 10,000 would you get if you have an average of 10,000 Buddhas per kalpa? It wouldn't happen that often.
Apparently the first one was over 9 foot tall, pale blue, and his hands reached his knees.
I'm just coming on to that, Jane, actually, because I'm going to discuss... Yeah, well, thanks for... You're absolutely right. There's even an alleged photo, which I'll be showing you in a minute. Along with the idea of the Saviour, the Messiah, would be accompanied the Antichrist. And sometimes the Antichrist does appear as a fake Messiah. That's in some of the ideas, not just in Islam, but in many, many other beliefs as well. The Messiah al-Dajjal would first present themselves as a Messiah, then reveal themselves to be the ultimate evil. And there's lots of speculation about the arrival of the Antichrist on Earth and who it might be. No, it's not Professor Brian Cox. I know I don't like him, I don't dislike him that much.
You will.
This guy's Benjamin Creme. Now, he's a Scottish guy. Now, he spent much of his life, actually from 1945 onwards until his death in 2016, he spent his life talking about the arrival on Earth of the Maitreya. He believed that the Buddha, the Maitreya, had emerged. Now, he was a theosophist, so he actually believed in a lot of the ideas of Helena Blavatsky, a very interesting lady indeed from Russia. And theosophists actually adopted a lot of the ideas that you see in these various cultures. The Maitreya, not only was the Maitreya going to arrive, he knew who the Maitreya was, and that he actually existed. And in the early 1980s, and I remember actually watching this as a child on TV, he did a press conference in which he announced the arrival of the Maitreya on Earth. The Maitreya had been born in India and had flown to London on a plane and was living in the East End. This guy, as Jane just said, this guy has very bright blue eyes and is very tall. But somehow he was living anonymously in the East End of London, even despite this amazing stature he has. Now, people have denounced Creme as a crank. He never changed his ideas. His organisation, Share International, was very, very popular. He appeared on several radio shows that I like, such as The Unexplained with Howard Hughes. He was on that once, and he was on a couple of other shows. Did Miles ever interview him? I don't know. He's the sort of person Miles might want to interview. He's gone now, but he would have liked to interview. But he did say that Maitreya was appearing on Earth very soon. Now, believe it or not, as I said, I promised you possibly a photograph of the Maitreya, and this actually might be a photograph of the Maitreya. The guy on the left of that photo could be the real Maitreya. Now, this is something that happened in 1986 in Kenya. The lady on the right, holding the microphone, is called Mary Akotsa, and she used to run a spiritual retreat on the outskirts of Nairobi, the capital of Kenya. And that she used to, these were very popular, thousands of people used to come along to her services, and they were outdoors in her back garden. She had a very big garden. And one day she announced the arrival of the Maitreya, and a light appeared in the sky, a moving star. It was almost like a UFO experience, not unlike the Fatima sightings. And this man suddenly appeared amongst the crowd, and he was described as being a beautiful, warm, compassionate, radiating energy of love and compassion and wonder, a divine individual. And I suppose this would just become another urban legend. If it hadn't been, a local news reporter was there at the time, got a couple of photographs of this guy, and also wrote a story describing exactly what he saw. Now, it gets a bit strange after this, because the reporter also describes speaking to this man, and this man asked him if he could give, he said, "Did you have a car?" And this reporter said yes. He said, "Could you give me a lift to the bus station?" Which is I think, seeing as this guy appeared in a shaft of light, why did you need a lift to the bus station? I don't know. But anyway, we mere mortals mustn't ask these questions. So this reporter gave the Maitreya a lift to the bus station. And the man got out, they had an interesting conversation, which wasn't particularly inspired. Then the man got out of the car, he turned around, waved and disappeared. So the story goes. So where the Maitreya is now, I don't know. If he's in the audience, could he please stand up? Who's the Maitreya? And of course, the story of the apocalypse has inspired so many movies, especially horror films. I'm going to bring up three films now. Two of them, I believe, I would classify as horror films, actually. This, of course, is The Omen. There's little Damien there, the devil child, who grows up and to be played in the third instalment, which is very interesting. It's very interesting, the third one, actually. It's not as famous as the first one, but the second and especially the third of the Omen trilogy is very good. This is the Antichrist played by Sam Neill, a New Zealand actor. And he's kind of like... A lot of Antichrists are portrayed this way in horror, in fiction. Indeed, the next example I'm going to give you. He's very, very rich, he's suave, sophisticated, charming, and everyone thinks he's wonderful, and things like that. And indeed, that fits the profile of someone else, Nikolai Carpathia, who is the Antichrist in the Left Behind series. Now, these are primarily a series of books. There's about 20 of these books. Believe it or not, I've read them. Yes, I've got way too much free time, man. They've been made into some films as well. There's 3 original films, and there's now a new film starring Nicolas Cage, which refers to the arrival on Earth of basically the entire Book of Revelation's scenarios played out in fictional form, including people disappearing. It's known as the rapture. Well, rapture means, literally, it's from a Latin word, it literally means to pick up. And there's several lines in the Book of Revelation that indicates that God's chosen people would be lifted up out of leaving behind just their clothes they're standing in would just be left behind. It all depends who you talk to, because the original idea of the saved would be that there would be 100,000 people saved from each of the tribes of Israel. This was the original idea. Now, to me that sounds a bit unfair. Because, first of all, I'm out of the picture. I'm not Jewish, that's me out of the picture already. But even if you were, I mean, just imagine they're just ticking boxes as you go into the pearly gates and you stop and say, excuse me, that's it, we've got 100,000 here. And the guy behind says, but I kept the Mosaic law. I went to synagogue, I loved my neighbour, I honoured my father and mother and all these things. He says, yeah, but we've got 100,000 from your tribe, we're moving on to the Levies next. Enjoy the lake of fire. Seems unfair, doesn't it? You see, there's so many things in sacred texts, and I don't want to offend people who believe in them. They don't always make sense. They don't cohere if you just read them all. I mean, it's not my point. It's not my desire this evening to promote any particular worldview. My point is that these sacred texts may be contradictory. This idea of the end times might not make sense. It may be different depending on your belief system, but it is a universal concept that appears to be some kind of Jungian archetype, and the question is why. How many of you seen The Second Coming? This was a mini-series written by Russell T Davies, who went on to produce Doctor Who. And now there is actually Christopher Eccleston, who actually played the Ninth Doctor in the series before it all went downhill. He was actually pretty good. He plays as a humble, not a humble carpenter from Galilee, but a humble video store rental worker from Manchester. And it turns out that he is the Second Coming. He performs miracles. I would classify this as a horror movie. It's not suitable for the faint of heart. You have people possessed by demons. There's no actual Antichrist figure as such in this movie, in this 2-part miniseries. But there are people who become possessed, and their eyes change, become like glowing, beady, silvery blobs in their head, and when they're possessed by the demons. And that, to me, I've heard stories like that about what happens when people are indeed taken over by evil forces, and I do believe that can happen. I seriously do. J.R. Tolkien was a very interesting person. He was not only a great writer and a great intellectual, very intelligent, but he was very spiritual. He was in touch with very, very deep archetypal spiritual forces. They're very deep as well into the etheric nature of humanity and the universe. And his works are loaded with these kinds of themes. The One Ring is particularly interesting because the One Ring represents an object in which can be described the entire embodiment of the evil of the world, in a sense the Antichrist archetype, or the presence of evil in the world. It's not unlike the Greek myth of Pandora's box. This was a curious young woman who opened a container in which all the evils of the world were contained, therefore it all came out. It's similar to Adam and Eve with the apple, eating the apple. It's very similar. And the One Ring, the quest of the hobbits, Frodo Baggins and the others, throughout the Lord of the Rings, is to destroy the One Ring. Now that is an enormously apocalyptic mission. They have within their possession an object, a tiny object, in which the evil's forces of the world are concentrated, and they have to destroy it. Once they've done that, then the fourth age begins, the king comes back, and they kind of all live happily ever after. But it's an extraordinary idea. Well, M. Night Shyamalan, I think, is a very, very good filmmaker. He's most famous for The Sixth Sense, Signs, Unbreakable. This is the film he made which everyone forgets. It's called The Lady in the Water. It was absolutely trashed by the critics. It lost millions at the box office. But you know, I think it's very underrated. It's a very underrated film indeed. It stars Bryce Dallas Howard, someone who went on to star in another of his films, playing a spiritual being, or a nymph, who can see the future. And at one point, she informs a young writer, who's actually played by the director. Shyamalan appears in all his films, but in this particular film he plays a major supporting role, that he's going to write a book that is going to inspire someone to change the world. Again, it's this idea that there's something wrong with the world, there's a solution, and this is the solution. Once this is done, once this task, this mission is accomplished, things will be all right, they'll be better. But you know what, you don't have to believe in God or any form of spiritual idea at all to have apocalyptic ideas. This is Dr. Katie Rauman, she's a cosmologist, and she's done a video in which she describes how she believes the world is going to end. And she describes, for example, the energy in the universe petering out eventually. There'll be like more and more stars, they'll become black holes, and eventually this will continue and continue until there is some kind of, she believes, moment where there'll be some kind of continuum in which time will cease to have any meaning. It sounds quite boring to me. But this is their version of the apocalypse. Also, there's Marxism. Now, Marxism is very interesting because it's a completely secular idea. Marxists are universally atheist. They reject anything etheric at all. They are political, it's a political philosophy, and a completely atheist, skeptical, material, secular one. Yet, if you read not just what Karl Marx said in the Communist Manifesto, which is the foundational political textbook of Marxism, is very interesting. You can read it in a couple of hours, it's quite short, but it says things like, society will take all the forces of production and the means of commerce as well as exchange and manage them in accordance with a plan based on the availability of resources and the needs of the whole society. Unfortunately, Klaus Schwab says something similar, so you can't necessarily trust these people. In this way, most important of all, the evil consequences which are now associated with the conduct of big industry will be abolished. There will be no more crises. Instead of generating misery, overproduction will reach beyond the elementary requirements of society and ensure the satisfaction of all of the needs of all. In this way, such an abundance of goods will satisfy the needs of all its members. The division of society into different mutually hostile classes will then become unnecessary and intolerable, just as the peasants and manufacturing workers of the last century changed their whole way of life. People will no longer be, as they are today, subordinated. Industry controlled by society of a whole, operating to a plan, purposes, well-rounded human beings, faculties developed beyond balanced fashions. It continues to wax lyrical in that way. But you know what, this language in the Communist Manifesto is nothing compared to some of the modern adherents of Karl Marx. The author China Miéville, for example, is a fascinating individual. As much as I disagree with him, I can't, politically, I can kind of understand him, because he describes the process of the socialist revolution in an almost messianic, apocalyptic way, and there are many, many others. This is not confined to the left wing of politics. Francis Fukuyama he was one of the neoconservatives in the United States, and he wrote a book called The End of History. And he believed that the whole world was gradually transforming into liberal democracies, in which there would be free market capitalism and basically the end of oppression and tyranny for all, forever. It's strikingly similar to Karl Marx, and I find it strange that many on the left actually moved over to this right-wing idea, including most famous being Christopher Hitchens. But there are many others indeed. I suppose this leads me to ask the question, what about myself? I follow no religion, but I accept spiritual reality. I'm interested in spiritual ideas. I'm affiliated to no political movement, but I take a keen interest in politics and I have political opinions. What are my ideas? Now, I have to look at myself, and when I think about this, I am a ufologist, conspiracy theorist, paranormal enthusiast, I'm against the New World Order, etc., etc. And funny enough, I see the same within the truth movement, within the conspiracy sphere, whatever you want to call it. I also see this archetype, this idea that we can end the tyranny caused by the deep state, the Illuminati, whatever you want to call them. There's all kinds of different ideas about how long they've been around and what they want to do. I mentioned Klaus Schwab earlier on. And if we can just defeat that, if we can end their machinate, the crises they generate, the lockdowns, the economic downturns, the rising fuel prices, if we can get rid of the people who engineer these things, we'll live in a new, happier world, something better than what we have now. The end of the New World Order, the post-Illuminati world. That's just, despite the fact I don't adhere to any of the political or religious ideas I described in this talk, I see that within myself. I see that same concept. It is a Jungian archetype. It's an upwelling from the collective unconscious that seems to exist in everyone. A disquiet, a feeling of disquiet, a splinter in your mind, as Morpheus said. That somehow the world is not the way it's meant to be. It's not meant to be this way. Something's gone wrong. I mean, the term, you see, most of these religious beliefs that actually talk about, and indeed some of the non-religious ones that talk about the apocalypse, also talk about the fall of man, that we somehow fell from grace. We were in a state of high consciousness and we fell to a low state. David Icke talks about this. It can be symbolised as as I said, the opening of Pandora's box, the eating of the apple in the Garden of Eden, the creation of the One Ring. Call it whatever you like. It could, like I said, in fictional form too. This disquiet exists, the sense that this has happened. If this disquiet is justified, which surely it is, can we return to a state of grace? Unless, if it is just some huge illusion, it's just some ridiculous fantasy, and it doesn't actually refer to anything truly objective in this world, then why does it exist? Why does it exist in so many cultures, in so many religions, in so many belief systems, in so many of all kinds? Whether religious, whether spiritual, whether secular, whether fictional, in the case of Tolkien. Why does it exist if it's not real? I suppose that's something I think I've come to terms with. And I think that perhaps we can have this situation. I mean, we have do you remember the 2012 phenomenon? In 2012, do you remember, it was the end of the Mayan calendar, or it was going to turn into a new calendar, a new long count, a 5,000 plus year long count. And this was a big thing within this movement. I mean, I remember people came up with all kinds of ideas about what might happen on the 21st of December 2012. Catastrophe or Ecstasy, which was a subtitle of Jeff Stray, the book he wrote about this particular subject. As it happened, things were quite normal on that day, if I recall correctly. However, a few years later, things did begin to change, and when we had 2016 with everything associated with that, and indeed the December 17th New York Times article, which really began the new UAP, new ufology thing, which I remember I was actually in the basis studio at the time with Colin, and it broke live on the air, and I'll never forget that. I'm kind of wondering if that moment was somehow connected to the 2012 phenomenon. I've also found it interesting how that 2012 phenomenon occurred just 12 years after the second Gregorian millennium. Is that a coincidence? I mean, no one knew anything of the Mayan calendar when this idea of Jesus and when Jesus was born and the year he was born and how it's 2,000 years since he was born. No one knew anything about the Mayan calendar at that time. The same goes for the Yuga cycle in Hinduism. Now, we're actually approaching a change in the Yuga cycle. The Kali Yuga, which is the one we're in now, supposedly ruled over by the goddess Kali, will be replaced by the Satya Yuga or Arya Yuga, the golden age, the age of nobility. Do you know when that's going to happen? Do you know what year that's going to happen? Anyone, any ideas? 2025. Just a few years away. And again, so we have these three moments in mythology, completely unconnected mythology apparently, happening at the same time. It could be a coincidence. It could not be. But it's something that I'm very interested in. I think that people within the truth movement understand this. I think the one big difference I think between the religions and the truth movement is there's no one in the truth movement who represents an embodiment of the Messiah. There are people who think they do. I can name a few, yeah. Miles. But if anyone thinks they're the Messiah, could you please stand up now? Nobody? All right. But apart from that, I said these archetypes are sound. They're there. Now, I believe they refer to. I would believe in that case, we should take them very seriously. We should regard this mythology as referring to something real in the same way that the flood mythologies from all over the world do seem to correspond to the end and the rising of the sea levels at the end of the Ice Age. It's identical. It's an identical mythological structure. Universal, across the world, all talking about the same basic story. It's got to be real. So, I'd like to know your thoughts now. Does anyone have any questions or comments or criticism, just constructive or destructive? Abuse?
Yeah.
But don't you put your hands up, guys. I've got 10 minutes left, I think. Sir?
So what comes after the destruction? So, you can use a microphone down on stage.
The gentleman just asked what comes after the destruction.
This was recording, so if we do something like this, like say, come and speak here, you can
All right,
cut it out on the edit. So if anybody wants to speak here, come and speak here on
All
this.
right. Sure. The gentleman, I can just tell you what the gentleman asked. He asked what comes after the destruction. Well, this will, you see, in all these belief systems, or most of them, I think, with the exception of a few New Age ones, see this apocalypse, even though it's not a bad thing, it's not something that's universally evil in the sense that it's like the nuclear Armageddon thing. It's something that will turn out to be a good in the end. It's something we should welcome, but it is preceded by some great difficulties. There's a very, very turbulent transitional period between the fall from grace and the rise back to the ascent to grace, or whatever terminology you use, the revolution against capitalism, the war of the ring. Whatever your belief system or whatever terminology you use, there will be, after the struggle comes a time of great joy, peace and happiness, but the nature of that will depend on your belief system too. Some people like China Miéville, they refuse even to discuss it. They say, we don't know, we won't know what it's like, because we can't even conceive of it in today's world. Anybody else? Speak now. There's a microphone here if you want to come down and see it. Yes, madam. You should pull it out. I think you can come down a little bit. Okay.
Right. How do you think this ties into the whole transhumanism agenda? And how do we have a golden age if we're all Borg?
Yes, this is a very good question, and I think you see, the Illuminati also have this very same belief system. I think it's a very important part of their belief system. They have their own kind of millenarial apocalypse, which is the creation of their great work of the ages, the New World Order, which indeed involves things, that's kind of technology that was not envisaged when the idea first came about. The term great work of ages, I think, dates back to, was it Brigham Young? I think it was Brigham Young who first termed it. And that to me is an apocalypse basically, which is contradictory. It's a 90-degree angle to the interests of humanity. Therefore, the quest for my own apocalypse is to oppose and combat that. So, exactly, if we're all Borg, basically that's the Illuminati heaven and our hell. So,
It doesn't necessarily mean that everyone is going to be, does it?
doesn't necessarily everyone. Well,
many of us are going to ascend into a different higher dimension.
Yeah.
We're going to leave all that
All right.
behind.
I think you need to come to the microphone, sir.
Oh.
Sorry.
The question, please use the microphone. Colin Kay. You say that we're all stuffed, if we're all poor, but that's not going to happen, is it?
I don't believe it'll happen, no.
No,
I won't be doing
it
this
can
if I have
happen
no
for
hope.
some.
It may not happen for hopefully it won't happen for anyone.
Well, that would be nice, but it could happen for some, and that could be achieved, and it can stay on the lower dimension on which it's been created. But the rest of us are going to be going to a higher dimensions, and it just won't exist.
If you refer to like the spirit world or what awaits us after our physical death on Earth, then yes, I do believe something does await us. I can't prove that, but I think we've got reason to be hopeful for that. And exactly, yes. Although I do like the world we have now, I enjoy my physical existence in this incarnation, and I'd like it to be as happy as possible for those who come after me, which is why I've dedicated my life to this. But you're correct, yes. Does anyone else want to come to the mic? All right, so I'll tell you what, you can have a bit of a longer break then. It's taken me slightly less time than I thought. So I'll let Miles and Sam decide when you want to come back for the finals or next speaker. So many thanks. Thanks for listening, everyone. There's actually this is adapted from a longer 2-hour studio version of this talk, which is on my YouTube channel. It goes into more detail.
Thank you very much, Ben Emlyn-Jones. Ben.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm in Devizes. The events of the day are over. Last speaker was Maria Wheatley. I'm sort of like getting over doing my talk, which I really enjoyed doing. And we're now in Devizes, heading for somewhere where we can get something to eat. I'm here with my friend Julianne, and we've just driven down from the venue. And the others are somewhere around the place, but I'm supposed to be doing something at Miles's place in terms of broadcasting later. So, seeing as I'm staying at Miles's, that's something I'll have to sort out at the time. But right now, we just got to eat. Everyone's going for dinner now, so nothing's going to happen till after that. I'm just trying to remember where the Silk Mercer is, the Witherspoons in Devizes. Hopefully, we'll be able to get some food there. If not, there's lots of other places we can go. Well, good morning and welcome to the Bases Project headquarters. I'm here with this lovely picture of Stonehenge behind me, which you've probably seen before because it hangs in Miles' spare bedroom where I am. Sorry I didn't do any more filming last night, but I just too much was going on. I was a bit too tired. Julianne and I went to the Wetherspoons and had dinner, and then we I got in touch with Miles and we eventually met up with him. Colin and the others went on a skywatch up on Hackpen Hill, which I could have gone to, but I needed to eat more than anything else. I hadn't eaten all day, so I didn't go to that. Then we met up with Miles in the curry house, the One Spice, and Kerry was there and Neil. It was very nice. So I had a little bit of a starter just to keep them company, and then we went home, and I was just so tired. I slept really well indeed. Now Miles, I'm keeping my voice down and trying to stay inconspicuous because Miles is kind of like storming around the house. He's yelling and swearing. From what I gather from his incoherent rants between the profanities, he can't get his printer to work, and he's lost his car keys. So I'm hoping that'll sort itself out soon. It usually does. It's important. I think it's worth thinking of Miles as kind of when Miles is getting ready for a conference. I think it's worth imagining him as a high-speed train, and you've just got to stay off the railway tracks, stay out of his way. I mean, it's like, on railway tracks you have those big signs saying, "Stay out, keep out, no trespassing, danger of death, £1,000 fine," things like that. imagine him on a railway track, and you just got to keep off the track. I think that's the best way to think of it. Hopefully things will... see, the thing about Miles' conferences, there's a plan, and the plan is like shelved, it's changed, and it's shelved at the last minute and thrown out, and on the day of the conference itself, basically things happen as they happen. But somehow it works. Somehow it always works. Some saint must sort of watch over him, I swear. Because no matter how difficult it is, somehow when it actually comes to the day of the conference, things work. Definitely. I'm here with there's only me and Jane in the house right now. Jane's having a bath. When she's finished, I think we're going to drive for the... we have to leave for the conference, although Miles will probably go ahead of us, so that's okay. I can't remember who the speakers are today, but it's the second day of this 3-day conference. The weather is beautiful. Well, it is if you're not working. I mean, it's not very nice weather to work in, but it's hot weather. We've got a heat wave going on at the moment, and so that tends to get people out. It does. Now, the attendance, you may have noticed, the attendance was down a bit yesterday. That's because it was a Friday. There was probably about half the seats full. It could well be standing room only again today, like it was at the Christmas event, which means I hopefully sell some books. I actually will. I actually only sold 1 book at the conference yesterday. I'm hoping I'll sell some more today and Sunday, because there'll be more people around. So fingers crossed. Wish me luck for that. Yeah, it's so far so good. Great fun. I'm in conference mood at the moment, so I'm really getting into it. And you got the extra day. That makes a lot of difference. This is normally the Saturday morning. Is normally when conference starts. It starts, and we've already had 1 day, so that's great. So, see you in a little while.
I do remember where it used to be.
Oh, well, you can't put it through the car wash every day. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I'm with Jane. Jane, are you speaking today?
No.
Jane's not a speaker at this conference, but Jane has, as you know, has spoken at previous conferences, and we're now heading to Pusey. We're actually running very late. It's almost 10 o'clock, but the conference probably hasn't started yet, so I think we're probably... it never starts on time, as I said. It was about an hour late yesterday. So we're just taking our time and enjoying the way. And we listened to a very peaceful piece. It's like a violin solo on classical music to calm us down. After it's Miles' tension tends to rub off a bit. You can't really avoid it rubbing off. But I'll keep speaking so I don't get a third-party strike. But you can hear it. It's a beautiful piece. And so my friends are all on the way. So. I've checked with them, so must be meeting everyone else soon for day 2 of the Basis Project 2022 conference.
Which Claire picked up on at a certain place at a certain time. So, over the last 3 or 4 couple of months, I have been, certain witnesses have come to tell me what's happening and positively identifying the diagrams in Elena's book. Now the point is, they're dark matter entities, they're shadow life forms, and they're in one particular area. I think this is near Iran?
Turkey.
Turkey. This is Turkey. And this is the Google map animation. It does this all for you. I haven't done this.
This is very important. Julie Phelps mentioned this.
The hydras? Those are big hydras. Not the ones in the vaccine. Yeah, the ones in the vaccine are not this size.
50 feet across, according to the scale.
There's more than 8 legs on that. Octopuses. Well, anyway, that's my happy slappy presentation for today. The main thing is that...
a minor break now between the speakers. Hey, Colin. All right, Colin's arrived. A minor break now, it's just a 2-minute stretch break. I missed most of Miles' talk because we were late. This has to be the one day he starts on time, isn't it? So Jane and I turned up like about half an hour late, and so I missed Miles' talk. So what he did mention at the end I actually caught a little shot of it there because it's very important. Julie Phelps actually posted this on her social media. She's not here today, but she came across this thing on Google Earth. It's in a very remote part of eastern Turkey. It's difficult to get to because there's been a civil war raging there for about 30 years. It's not far from. It's in the same area of Göbekli Tepe, which is another. Well, you know, as you know, Göbekli Tepe is very difficult to get to because of the war. But there's these things in this field. It looks like a field. It's like there's a fence around it, you know, like a farm's field, and inside it are a collection of strange creatures, like they resemble spiders or octopuses. They have multiple legs. And there's a collection of about 20 of them in this field. There's shadows of them, and they're very, very distinctive. I can't see what in a field could make that kind of pattern or make those kinds of objects. Obviously, it's Google Earth images. You can't tell any details, but I do know that they're like, from the scale of Google Earth, you know they're about 50 feet across. That's scary. To me, and what many people pointed out, they look very much like the hydras. Now, the hydras are these strange little beasties, these strange sort of biologics that have been found inside the V words, the medication they've been putting into people. Very, very odd. And scary, I think, if they really are 50 feet across. What they are, don't know. We'll find out.
External dark dimension. Finding itself alone and only vaguely aware of other entities and where it came, it became paranoid, egotistical and aggressive. Its psychological mentality describes like
Now that was a very interesting talk. Now I can't remember the name of the speaker, sorry, but he's a very interesting chap.
Bob Brown at the back of the conference room this afternoon.
I'll be showing you the stalls later. You don't, alright. He's alright.
Please do go see Bob Brown. We spoke yesterday, he's in the back of the hall there. He's got evenings going to chat with him.
Alright. I haven't actually had a chance to think over what he said, but he talks about the elusive mysteries. Now that's interesting because they indeed have found traces of ergot. Now, ergot is it's a fungus that grows on rye, and it produces a toxin. But it was from this that Albert Hofmann in 1938 synthesized LSD. Is it possible that a natural form of LSD was used by the people who saw the oracles of Delphi and Dodona, and therefore experienced an altered state of consciousness? And he talks, interestingly, he talks about the demiurge. Now, I've heard the demiurge. Hey, Jane. The demiurge. It's called other things. Rex Mundi, the Metatron, and it's basically the symbol of Lucifer, the light bringer, of which, in a sense, the universe as we know it is not a creation of the god Yahweh. Now this is a heretical idea for Jews, Christians and Muslims, because it suggests there are two gods. There is the god known as Yahweh, Allah, but there was also another god that was cast out of heaven. And this is not the same as Satan. It's often been equated to during the Inquisition, for example. But this is the Rex Mundi, that the Cathars called him, the king of the world that created the universe that we see today. This is why the Cathars were exterminated, because they believed that Jesus couldn't possibly be God made flesh. They believed that he was literally an etheric being on earth. Not that matters. I don't think that matters particularly. Certainly doesn't justify burning thousands of people at the stake, but there you are. You see the stories of Jesus repeated over and over again through ancient mythology, for example, in ancient Egypt, Greece, Mesopotamia. Certain themes. A saviour God being born to a virgin mother. The saviour God being born on the 25th of December. The saviour God having 12 disciples, etc., etc. Does that story sound familiar? Exactly. Oh, right, yeah. He was born in... Oh, right, yeah. I know he died in I believe he was buried in Pakistan. That's an interesting story. I'm doing my little video, Kerry. Do you want to be on my video? Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. And he talks about something I've noticed, the psychopath versus empath thing, and how that there's a lot of like books that essentially, I don't know if they preach moral nihilism, but they're about moral nihilism. Lord of the Flies, about these children on a desert island who descend into barbarism, and the bullies like literally kill the weaker children. Little fat boy gets murdered. But there's also, you see this theme in popular fiction as well, such as soap operas. EastEnders, for example, is an absolute celebration of moral nihilism. And people say, well, it's only... Hey, Julie, how you doing? It's Julie. You know Julie. How you doing? How are you? You know, Julie's been in the show before. I'm just doing my videos, it happens. How are you getting on?
I'm doing well, yeah.
Oh, good. Miles just talks about those creatures in Turkey.
Hydras, yeah.
Yeah, that's a weird thing, isn't it?
We can see
that
the legs are not like arachnids, they're like flexible.
Yeah, they're more like octopus's tentacles. Yeah,
like
they're not segmented. Just they're not
because arachnids are segmented. So yeah, so you can see they're trapped in a force field as well. It was somebody who shared it with me, and I shared it with Miles. So yeah, and you can actually look it up on the Google Maps or Google Earth. So.
I did. I went to the coordinates that were there, and it's definitely there. Do check it out, what Miles was talking about. But it's 34 degrees east, 34 north, 43 east, something like that, and it's within that area. I can't remember the exact coordinates, but it's definitely there. I can't think of. There's no street views of that area. You know, there's not for miles.
You know, like the little person drag the little person, see any street views won't let you. So that means it's an area cut off from anything like that.
Yeah, the nearest street view is a main road about 60 miles away. It's so you can't actually see it from ground level. But if anyone's been there and they've got any photos, let us know. I mean, it's in a quite inaccessible area. There's been a civil war being fought there for about 30 years. It's near Göbekli Tepe, actually. You know, where that's why it's so difficult to go there, because there's always fighting going on. But I'd love to know more. If you've been there and you've got a photograph of that field, let us know, because it looks like a farmer's field, doesn't it?
It's a large field, yeah, but you can see it's kind of walled, and obviously it's a force field, because you can see them trying to escape and they can't, you know, by what you can see there.
Yeah.
And there seems to be, like we were picking up, I mean, and somebody else was picking up, like the one that's separate is the leader, and it was slightly bigger than the rest, and then the others are like at the other end, they're all trying to escape, but they can't, so let's cross fingers that it stays that way.
Yeah, maybe that's it, because these things, I mean, there is a scale on Google Earth, and I worked out these things are 50 feet across. So I wouldn't want to meet one of them in a dark alley at night. I mean, they're horrible looking things, are you? So it's pointed at me. So so Julia, it's interesting. If you've been in that area and you have a photograph or you're planning on visiting that area, obviously take care. But let us know if you've seen anything.
Or if you've seen anything like that elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Another aspect too.
They might. Sorry.
The ones not captured, so you know, those ones are captured.
Exactly. They might appear in other places, but thanks, Julie. Thanks very much. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you as well, Ben.
Yeah, cool. Hello, it's Julie, who's in a pro video, yeah. So I'm going back to the subject of the speaker. I can't remember his name, but he said that basically the higher levels of the universe do believe in like divine justice, but it's the lower levels of the universe which have this dog eat dog mentality. I'll just say more about that later because it's very interesting. Anyway, I'm gonna mingle. Is Bob Woodstall? Bob is the. Do you want to appear on my video?
One more time.
Is this Bob? Sorry.
Yes.
Would you like to appear on the video?
That's your call.
Oh, right, if you don't mind. This is Bob, who is the organiser of these great American conferences like the UFO Megacon and the UFO Congress. And these are some DVDs. I'm going to get some of these. You say it's like, how much is 5 of them?
£10 each, 3 for 25, 7 for 50,
Oh, right.
and 16 for 100.
Oh, right, I might get 7 then if I can make it a round number. I want to get Prudence. Prudence, she's very interesting.
Extremely.
Yeah, and
that presentation especially.
Yeah, she's someone not many people know about Prudence Calabrese, but
she's almost unknown.
Remote viewer, yeah.
Almost unknown.
George Mann, the war after you in the Soviet Union. Oh, right, I'll get one of those. I want to get. I think I can get like. Oh, he's interesting. Yeah, I'll get that. Fouché. Hey, how you doing? How you doing? Hello, how things? All right. Oh, cool. Yeah. So I'm filming, but you're not in frame, don't worry. My friend Rhiannon from the Welsh Triangle's just arrived. That's all right. How are you? You okay? I'm just selecting some of these.
Yeah.
Would you like any? They're DVDs of people who've spoken at the big American conferences. Dr. Carla Turner. Now she's passed away, sadly. She was quite young.
Yes, she has. Yes, and she passed quite young.
Yeah, that was sad. But I remember I'll get that one. She's very interesting. That's in 1993. So how long have you been doing these conferences for, Bill?
35 years.
Wow, that's quite something. Honestly, I'd love to have come to the early ones, but I wasn't. I sort of got into UFOs. Like, oh, Jim Mars. I loved it. He's a lovely chap. Jim Mars.
Amazing researcher, amazing man. He's such an important figure that I brought a selection of 3 presentations.
All my secrets. Oh, I've read the book of that.
And again, these are different than other things you'll find because ours it's 2 hours. 2 hours.
Right, I'll have that one. Now that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5. All right. So I'll get 2 more, and I'll give you 2 more for 50. Right. Oh. Alec Newell. Oh, he's interesting. He's a New Zealand chap.
That's correct. You're very.
I'm an incredible anorak of things like this.
He does. Yeah.
I've not been to one of your conferences in the States.
There's very few people that would recognize Alec.
Oh, yeah. Tony Topping's mentioned him a few times. I mean, I'm an absolute mainstay of like the British UFO conference scene. I just don't. I've not been to any of the American ones yet, but I can have one more.
Sebastian Koga talks about the Japanese historical record of the Japanese people's connection to others.
Well, that sounds interesting.
That's again completely unknown stuff to almost anybody.
I'll probably come back and get another though. But what's the MJ12 panel? Is that
Now that was a fun panel. That was something. I'll tell you what that was. We were at a conference and Jim Delatosa said, "I've got a wonderful idea. One night, what we should do is to do an MJ12 panel." And it was ad hoc, right? It wasn't planned or anything.
The Majestic 12 documents.
Right, so he said, you'll play this person, you'll play this person, you'll play this person. So you've got a series of rather famous presenters playing various roles within the MJ12 panel, right?
Oh, that sounds very
dealing with this UFO problem. And it was fun doing it, and the audience was small because we did it at late at night after dinner. It was, it was just it was an ad hoc. It was a throw-in thing, right? But it turned out to be great. The audience was in stitches most of the time. It was a lot of fun, and you see a lot of very famous people in there, doing something you never see them do before, right? Which is to play a role. And it's all off the cuff. It's all ad hoc. It's just, there's no scripts, no rehearsing. It's just, they just did it. And it's a lot of fun. I mean, for people that care about the genre, care about the early days, care about some of these really important researchers, it's just an amazing document. And that's what it is.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thanks very much, Bill. I'll pay for you this. I'm just going to film a bit more of this stall here. Just have a look at these things here. There's some box sets here.
Now these right here are from last year's. This is the top 4. Look, I can tell you the ones I think are the best, right? But the best gauge of who the people thought were the best was based on how many DVDs they took home to share with their friends, right? And so this was number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4 from last year's conference. Now this was the best-selling day. This pack sold like bloody crazy. It was actually the number 5 seller overall, but it's in the entire day.
James Keenan, High Strangeness, Dwayne. Oh no, right. That's
so then this one, the number 2 seller is contained within this day. But yeah, that's phenomenal.
So Richard Doty was number 1.
Yes, it was.
He was in Blackpool at the conference of the Expo.
Yes, but he was, and he was tremendous, as you know. We were there. But this is even better. This is 2 hours, not 1 hour. It's a 2-hour presentation, and he, on Area 51, the stuff he reveals, this was the presentation of last year's conference.
Right. Well, he's a highly controversial figure, but he's always worth listening to, I think.
He is indeed.
So, well, thanks very much. So thank you very much for your interview done by my good friend Colin Woolford.
You're welcome.
Colin's I love Colin. He's a great guy.
I do as well.
He's great. Yeah, he's a good mutual friend of ours. Oh, I forgot that. Yeah. Oh, thanks. Well, this is my store. As you can see, I've actually managed to sell. Well, I gave one away actually, 2 Roswell Risings, and I've managed to sell. I've got one. No, Roswell Revealed. Sorry, I've sold 1 Roswell Revealed. I gave one away, and I sold 1 Roswell Revealed to a friend of the piano. No redeems yet, they're still there, but I've got other things here. Now you've seen these if you've been to some factories. This is a new one, the Einstein Conspiracy. Physics on the UFO's cover-up, work on Einstein's uniform field. Did Einstein's wife write a paper on the theory of relativity? This translation from German to English, working on the theory of 18th century alien contact, anti-gravity, ancient science, looks just up my street. And these got Tina Bird's book there. That's Tina's coming out soon. And you've seen these other things in Blackpool, but I'm sort of giving them away on my store. Some things I've just got from Bob's store. So, this, ladies and gentlemen, is a fish finger sandwich. I've never had one before. I'm about to have one now. I'm in the Royal Oak, this lovely little pub here, as you can see, in Pewsey. I've been here before. I feel like I might have filmed here before, and same place we had lunch yesterday, and so we got like a bit of time off. I'll tell you more about Mike Emery a little bit later because it's a bit complicated, but take it easy. Okay, it's another break, and there's been some additions to the stores. I'll just show you here. There's this one here, I sent it to all the publishers. Report on problems across global climate change on Earth. Those things are going to get hotter.
Son and daughter. It's like now we don't see.
How you doing? That's good. Here, this is Maria's store. These are Maria's books. Busty's managing her store. Hey Busty, hello again. How are you?
I like the word managing.
He's a nice guy.
So, you co-author this, Maria. Avery. That's Tron Drews.
Because I was told that these were not
I actually went on an activity with Maria on the Royal Stuff. It was a long time ago. That's there.
1 second. Okay. 1 second.
And here it
I haven't
is.
gone back and done a check because he's doing
Everyone is like...
performing.
And
So-
did you drink the...
Yeah, I drank the thing. I've actually got the...
Everyone's having a wonderful time.
Did you feel amazing?
People are all very happy.
No, oh no. No, but I ordered it from when they're in battle. I ordered it online and it just came, and it's a lot of hassle getting it. And a lot of hassle, which was enough for me to say,
Hey Karen, it's Karen Dodd. You are the co-organiser of this event,
Well,
aren't you?
allegedly, yes. I mean, Miles suggested that we do sort of collaborate, and I'm very happy to. I think that the main thing is really to try and get the people here and get the information out. That's what I'm more keen on. So I haven't done much of the work here. I've turned up and I've shared it a lot, and I've brought Harry. I call Harry of the Ether, Harry Rose, and some other,
He's
people
very
that I've suggested.
interesting,
He is. He's fascinating, and I think that's kind of where I would love the Freedom Network to go a little bit more deeper. But that was never why I set it up. It was just really for a means for people to find each other in their local community and do whatever they needed to do.
It's definitely, I don't know if I've signed up yet. If I've not, I will. I know a few people in my local area who'd be interested.
Brilliant.
But did you get into this because of the whole lockdown business? Or did that
I got into the
you?
Freedom Network, but I think I've been on this page as most of us in this room, have. I think I've been born awake knowing that something's not right, and I just feel, what do I do? And it came to me as a sense of urgency. Crumbs, there must be lots of people like me in lockdown that want to find each other, other people. So how can I do it? And it seemed obvious, it's just to set up a website and let people find each other through the website, so that it doesn't come through to me. They go straight to the town. Whoever, it could be you, it could be anybody, a random person. I don't know virtually any of them. And the main thing I think is that they're all autonomous groups. It's not a centralised organisation. It's just literally an infrastructure.
It's not dependent on electronic communication if it's a local group. Do you feel that the use of electronic communication is being restricted more and more these days to make life for people like us more difficult?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, what was I reading yesterday? There's a really good newsletter I get. I can't remember who it's from now.
The Light?
No. It's oh gosh. I can't remember. I wish I could, because what they were saying, they always say they really focus on the media and online activity and freedom of speech. And apparently, I think the government are already putting in whatever is necessary for the Freedom of Speech Act, even though it hasn't gone through Parliament. So it's like it's a no-brainer what they're planning to do. So we have to be very careful what we say. I think I'm not on any social media anymore. I use Telegram to connect with other groups to find out what's going on. But other than that, I'm not involved in any social media. I came off it at the very beginning of this because I was posting live videos of what's happening, and then they kept taking them off, and I thought, actually, I don't want to be part of.
I know what you mean. When I use it, but I don't depend on it. I use lots of alt text sites like Telegram because alternatives. It's always worth doing that. Don't depend on Twitter and Facebook, whatever you do.
No, exactly. Because also you're feeding the beast that is taking away our freedoms. Although it's useful, and it's like a drug, isn't it? But they know that, especially for the young people. You look at all the movements, or whether it's a conference like BASES, or whether it's a conference that I organise, the Uprise and Shines, or any of these groups, the majority of people are over a certain age. The youngsters aren't involved, and it is their future that we're trying to protect, and generations beyond them. But then you wonder why, and you see the life that they lead. They're sort of born with a phone in their hands these days, aren't they? Social media, Instagram, is selfies and all this kind of stuff. So part of the master plan is to keep them away.
I find most media propaganda is actually aimed at that generation rather than older people. Even though it's designed to be universal, but they're targeted more than ever, especially through schooling and things like that.
Absolutely. I've travelled around a lot. And prior to this, I set up a charity called Friends of Chima and Kizzy, and it is to build schools and to help communities locally. The focus at the moment tends to be in Sierra Leone, but it's taken me all over, and I love travelling anyhow. But wherever you go, in the poorest countries, people have a phone. They might not have shoes on their feet, and they might not have decent clothes, but they all seem to have a phone.
I've noticed that all over, even in the poorest third world countries, these networks have been established. Do you get? What concerns me is censorship is becoming more. Maybe it's a good thing that they're becoming more blunt and barefaced, but people like us have been taken taken away from public view, and they use phrases like countering misinformation, trust the science, things like that. There's hate as well as another one.
Absolutely. So we have to be very, very careful. So it's all planned, isn't it? It's all planned for their master plan. That's why meeting physically
in community is more important than anything. You know, we have to reach each other through, I guess, through the internet and through whatever means, whether it's WhatsApp or whether it's email or whether it's good old-fashioned phones, but they're trying to take those out of the system as well. But I think if we have established communities, or you know where your next door awake neighbour is, then, you know, you're halfway there to being sane for whatever's coming our way.
Yeah. Is it, you think, encouraging that not only that there's more and more people like us, but it seems like our enemies are getting more and more desperate? Is that a good sign, do you think?
I think it's a really good sign, because if you think back 3 years ago, you know, you might have been talking to really good friends or family members, and you might say something that's a little bit obscure to them, and their class you as bonkers, and then you have, you know, you either have the row and you try and prove your point, or you walk away. So you create a divide within your own, you know, family and friendship network before all this has kicked off. Now this has kicked off, we're all finding our tribes, our family, our new family. Metaphorically, we've lost many friends and family members, or physically, we've literally lost them. So I think it's a good thing, because we know what's coming, we know what's planned, we can speak the truth, and yeah, it's growing numbers, which is a good thing.
Oh, excellent. Well, I really want to say thank you, and to Miles as well. To Miles too.
So I hope he's got an ice cream. I think Miles is a little bit upset at the moment because his main speaker has not been able to get here because of the train situation. Right. So I think he's just pondering what the next move is.
These things do happen. But I just want to say a big thank you to both of you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for coming. No, and it's great to see you and to be part of it.
Oh, you're very welcome. You know, I've really enjoyed myself. I'm really enjoying every moment of this.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you, Ben. Great to chat with you. Okay.
Hi, I'm inside this healing tetrahedron. You may have seen him earlier. And I'm just going to watch Kerry Cassidy. This is the channel.
Magic Mike.
Hi, Magic Mike. Are you the one behind this?
I'm not the one behind it, no. I'm just along for the ride. I'm doing my best to relay the message, but the true mastermind is Mike Emery.
Oh, good old Mike, yeah.
I'm just a student, really. Just trying my best to relay the message.
Well, good luck with your studies with this. I'll see if it has. I'll let you know if it has any effect on me. I've got Julie's over there. She's doing it as well, so she'll tell me as well. Okay, so I'm going to watch Kerry Cassidy while I'm in this healing tetrahedron.
And the White House, which in some ways can be slightly interchangeable. Although Q, you know, you're thinking of the Q drops as a very specific communication tool. But in general,
where we go when we go all.
Q could also encompass the entire white hat movement for
get a better view from here, actually.
Control of the world. Right, so that Putin will not deal with Biden. Biden is basically a clone, and sometimes he's an actor, and sometimes he's what they call a double, probably wearing a mask. So he's a farce. And
I'm here with Mike Emery. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, same, Ben.
I've just been sitting in your little healing chamber there, and I was just wondering if you could tell me how they work exactly.
It's exactly. The triangular ethers are right next to chaos, and so inside those Merlin's chambers is chaotic and euphoric, because chaos in darkness has been converted to euphoric by herself, by God herself. Okay, which is why all of our orgone devices emit and broadcast euphoria. Yeah. And there are people spending time in Merlin's chamber and coming out giggling forever, basically. Yeah. Because the other thing that euphoria does is it scrapes off the karma. Okay? And when you get rid of all the karma, what's left over? The core kid. The fun hog. And this needs to be worldwide. And it will be. Because the EBS system will disclose bubble tech.
Oh, right. Is there a reason? Is the copper wire wrapped around one of the corners? Is that there for a reason?
The copper what?
There's a little copper wire wrapped around one of the corners. Is that there for a reason?
Yeah, it's connected to a Valerie wand and it's charging up the all three of those.
And I noticed you've lit. It's been elevated off the ground by these little plastic cones. Is that essential? Does it need to be elevated off the ground?
The cones are or bubble pieces that are what we call self-bubbling, because they have so much shrinkage onto the sand, which is little quartz crystals, creating piezoelectric energy, so they become self-bubbling. And that and the cone shape goes with the triangle shape. Everywhere you look at, it's a triangle.
Yeah.
And so then there's euphoric chaos coming out of them. So they're very powerful, the cones are. And you take one of those cones, a vax person take one of those cones and hold it to their body for like 15 minutes. No longer will there be any vax. That's one of the things we'd hope to do, but I don't know if we're going to get it accomplished.
That's interesting. Well, I did sit in there for about half an hour, and I listened to this very uplifting talk by Kerry, and I found it very, very invigorating. I don't know yet whether it'll have a longer term effect on me, but if it does, I'll let you know, because I know some people have feel very, very positive after sitting in there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Everybody will.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much.
Life force energy, you know.
Thanks very much for explaining that, Mike. Much appreciated. Mike Emery, so interesting. You've done your own talks for a while.
Hello, I'm very sorry for gate crashing your interview with this magnificent professor of whatever.
It's okay.
But you may wish to redo that last statement because I was cutting in on your audio.
No, it's all right, mate. No, it's okay, Miles. Thanks very much for everything, and thank you, Mike, for explaining that to me. Thank you. Well, it's day one of the conference is finished. We're outside Bouverie Hall now, and the weather's still lovely, and I'm just that's it. I'm not going to do a report on today any more than I've done already. And there's a lot I could say about the speakers and things like that, but I'll save it for later. I found that it's just difficult to do these kinds of reports when these things are going on. But it's been very, very fun. So now I think we're going to go to the Barge Inn. Now I've not been there for a while, so that'll be fun. It'll be fun to go to the Barge Inn. So obviously there's been a basis at the Barge before, but this particular conference is being used for the social event this evening. So let's just head there. Ladies and gentlemen, Jane and I have arrived at the Barge Inn. It was a bit difficult finding the place, but we did. We tried to sat nav, it didn't work. We found ourselves on the other side of the canal somehow. I don't know if we had aliens. Hey, all right. And our friends are over there, so we're going to go over and say hello to them. Well, this is the inside of the barge, and as you can see, all the fears that this mural had been obliterated are not true. It's still here. And it's a pool room again. It's a pool room again, so that's really good news. That makes me really happy. In fact, I'm just going to do it now. I'm just doing it now. So being back in here,
who are you doing that for?
Hapanwo TV. Yes, I'm doing a Hapanwo TV video. Jane just went like that. As you can see here, the ambience has gone back to how it was before. There's Busty's here, Tony's here, Busty's here, so that's cool. This is beautiful, this spot here by the canal with the boats, the hills, and here the beer garden. And Colin, how are you getting on?
I'm alright, yeah, it's a bit hot in there. Just had my
you did an interesting talk, didn't you? You did a talk about
about Star Wars, decoding Star Wars, higher truths in Star Wars. And
interviews, like Keep on stopping him.
No, yeah, it's only like I was a bit pressed for time, even though one of the speakers couldn't make it because of the trains. But yeah, I was kind of like standby, so I wasn't even actually 100% sure I was going to speak. I packed in a lot there. I don't know, I can talk quite quickly.
I'm glad Miles asked you instead of me.
Yeah, I know. It's like I suppose technically
I have nothing prepared for anything else prepared.
But no, it went well, and it's like there's been a more expanded talk next week at Kerry's. If anyone, I know this video probably is not going to go out probably till after that maybe, but yeah, I'll be in Watford, Hyams Manor for the Kerry Cassidy's event, so there'll be more of a longer time to talk about that, because I had to miss out sort of the section 2 of it. But yeah, no, it's deeper truths in Star Wars, really, going into names of characters and the religious stuff actually. So it did sort of dovetail into some of your material, which I found interesting, and even.
You say this is an apocalyptic story. I mean, the last one in particular is distinctly an apocalypse. I mean, it ends with the sort of post-apocalyptic kind of party, you know.
Yeah. Do you mean the Return of the
Jedi? Yeah.
Sorry, mate. Yeah, no, they are.
I mean, I'd love to get the sequel trilogy. I don't talk about because they're rubbish.
No, I do touch on that in the expanded talk, but
someone come up.
No, it was good and enjoyed it, and It's been a nice weekend so far. It's obviously quite chaotic after you come out. Everyone sort of goes off somewhere, and Miles is sort of disappeared. But then he likes to be on his own sometimes. You know, he kind of arranges it. So sometimes it can be a bit stressful.
I won't be able to join you in Watford, unfortunately. I can't make that, unfortunately.
Sorry to hear that, Ben.
Kerry invited me to speak, I had to turn her down, which was a great shame.
Well, it was very short notice, to be fair. So
yeah. What's it like to be at the Barge Inn again?
That's great. It's nice. It's a lovely place to come. Get decent food here.
It's a beautiful place.
It's not easy. Have so many people again, but we might do a little bit of a sky watch.
That's something we've got planned up, but we might do that this evening.
Just a short one, just so we can get back to Devizes for maybe a few drinks.
Yeah. I think that's next on the cards. But honestly, this is the perfect weather to come, the perfect day, perfect weekend, a hot sunshine, perfect time to come to the good old Barge Inn. It really is.
Absolutely.
And I'm pleased to say that there was a plan to ruin this. They were going to turn it into some kind of Italian restaurant, and that never came about thanks to Matthew Williams and his dedication.
Yeah.
So it's now dusk and the sun is setting. So
it's a good time to see UFOs, just in that period before it gets dark. So sunset has just literally happened. I think 9:22. So.
And as long as you can kind of, you got to watch out for the satellites, because when you recognise a satellite, you know what it is, and you can tell the difference. You also got to look when it's south. It's called Salisbury Plain, and you get flares and things sometimes there.
Yeah,
you get like ordnance detonations and stuff.
He was saying that's going to happen tonight.
Yeah, I saw it with David Griffin.
Training up the Ukraine soldiers or something.
Maybe something. Yeah. So, but once you the thing about sky watching is it's an acquired art. Once you know what to look for, you don't make those mistakes.
No.
So.
We went to Silver Hill last night, but we saw some high-flying planes. But I think that's what they were planes. I mean, some of them you couldn't see the navigation lights, but that's probably because they were so high up. But,
honestly, sky watching is simply just a fun social event, really. Even if you don't see anything strange, it's just nice to get together with fellow ufologists. It's as simple as that. Yeah.
Because you can't do it all. Well, I mean, you can do it all year round, but bloody hell, it gets cold sometimes.
Yeah.
So,
where I am finding people to do it with is just really difficult. Anyway, well, that's enough about my personal problems. Well, good morning and welcome to the Basis Project headquarters. It's Sunday morning now, the last day of the conference coming up. It's been a long, very detailed conference, and so I've got I've got to get ready for what's happening today. I'll tell you more about what's happening today in a minute. But first and foremost, I've got to review the speakers from last time, and I can't remember all their names. It's you've seen them. I mean, you've looked them up, but I've looked them up in the beginning. But I came in just when they started their speech, like 1 in the afternoon. I came in when he started his speech. But there's one guy who did a very interesting talk about. I came in. Basically, we were late, you see, and Jane and I turned up a little bit late, and Miles was doing his talk, and we came in just at the end of that. I must apologise for that, but I think we came as quickly as we could. We got a bit lost. Then we had Maria Wheatley did her talk. Firstly, I did my speech yesterday. As you know, you've seen. And then Maria did hers. Maria Wheatley did a talk which was different from the one she gave at Blackpool, and she talked a lot about the connection between Jesus and the Druids and Stonehenge, and how Stonehenge refers to the New Jerusalem. The New Jerusalem comes up in the Bible, and interestingly, this ties back to my own talk, where I mentioned the Book of Revelations, because the New Jerusalem is described in the New Revelation. It's described as appearing in the sky, and it's described as having, I think, foundations of various materials such as gold, jasper, garnet, and things like that. I can't remember them all. There's a list of materials that the New Jerusalem is made of. It appears to be a kind of Platonic ideal form, which is expressed in the Bible. Plato actually been very influential on a lot of religions that came after him and spiritual traditions. apparently the diameter of the Earth is encoded into Stonehenge and Glastonbury. And I suppose you've got to question, how did they know? How did they know? It's like I said about York Minster in a previous video. You know, these constructions were not. The fact that these constructions exist contradicts official history. We're told that the Neolithic age means New Stone Age because people only had stone tools. In the same way, we're told that when the cathedrals of Europe were built, we lived in a world of superstition and extreme poverty and no scientific knowledge. Again, you see, this is where it flies in the face of. It completely flies in the face of what we're told about our past. Maria also is Maria is very open to the idea of cover-ups. The fact that our false vision of the past is not down to some kind of stupidity or ignorance on our part. It is caused by a deliberate misrepresentation of the past by an intellectual elite that deceives us. I'm pleased to say also that Maria understands that the Roman era in Britain was not some golden age as it was portrayed to be, and of course I've covered that so many times, and that's what causes my Boudica moments. Oh, very interesting stuff. I'm sorry I haven't taken more detailed notes or given you more information about the various speakers. It was a very, very backwards and forwards kind of thing I was doing at this conference. I was going out for breaks, talking to people, coming into the speakers late, not being as disciplined as I normally am, I think, at conferences. Now, there's a gentleman, Dr. Martin, what's his name, Dr. Martin, somebody. He did a fascinating talk about the Eleusis mysteries. Now, this is he mentioned something that I've heard of before. The presence is to do with ancient Greece. There were these oracles. There was the oracle of Dodona, the oracle of Delphi. These were people who saw visions, and that they were often women who would descend into a cave and swim in a cave. Now, the idea of haunted caves is something very Greek. It's about something specifically Greek. It's probably where Plato got his idea of the cave, using his cave, of course, being a metaphor for our existence. And he talks about how something very interesting. People who went to see the oracles were given a glass of something to drink, a glass of some kind of drink, and we know that it contained rye. Now, and there's been traces of rye inside the cups they found, the archaeologists. Now, rye can often come down with a fungus called ergot, which is highly toxic. Any rye that comes down with this fungus has to be discarded. You can't eat it; it will kill you. Now, the thing about ergot contains several chemicals, like many of them toxic, but one of them was synthesized, was isolated and synthesized by Albert Hofmann in 1938, and we know it as LSD. And the question has therefore to come, is it possible that the reason people had these amazing experiences in the presence of the oracles, including these visions of the future and things like that, comes from, is it possible that some natural process that we don't know of separated the chemical, the natural chemical, which is the equivalent of LSD, from the ergot, the ergotine, the poison? It's an idea I've heard of before, and it's very, very interesting. He mentions comparative mythology. Jesus, of course, he makes some interesting points about Jesus, how Jesus was, a lot of the tropes of Jesus' life can be found in other mythology, often much older mythology from Greece, Egypt, Sumer, etc. For example, being born to a virgin mother. being born on the 25th of December, having 12 disciples, dying and being killed and then rising again. I mean, these can be said of others such as Horus, Mithras, etc. David Icke talked a lot about this. And then he says something interesting, the idea that the universe is some kind of dimension of darkness, ruled over by the archons, the word archon means the rulers. Now this is the idea from Gnosticism, like the Cathars, for example, believe this, that the universe was not the creation of God, it was the creation of a fallen spirit, an imperfect spirit known as Rex Mundi. It all goes by other names. It's probably best known as the Demiurge, Metatron, Lucifer. There are several other words for it. It's not the same as the devil, but it is the imperfect God. And that, for example, and he gave a very interesting example, something that I've thought about a lot. I find it very, very difficult, as you know, especially from my discussions with Slagser, I find it very, very difficult to argue against moral nihilism. Why is it not a dog-eat-dog world? Why shouldn't it be? Why shouldn't we have the law of the jungle in human society? The law of the jungle exists in nature, so why shouldn't it exist in human society? Things like that. I find it difficult to argue against that. But I instinctively know there's something wrong with it. I instinctively know it's something I have to oppose. And he mentions a book, quite a well-known book, called Lord of the Flies by William Golding. And it explores the idea that children basically are moral nihilists and barbarians, and left to their own devices, they will simply turn on each other. The bullies will not just punch the kids and take their dinner money, they'll kill them. However, he says that there are higher levels. He illustrates them. I think I've filmed them. He illustrating these balls on these spherical objects on the screen, which indicate some kind of different levels of dimensions, and the higher dimensions are trying to infiltrate the dimension of darkness, and that's why light workers are essentially they're like special forces or spies being parachuted behind enemy lines. It's a great analogy. It's a very apocalyptic idea, because it ties in very much with my own talk. Back in a sec. Now, Harry of the Ether. Now, this is a guy called Harry Rhodes. He did a really great talk about free energy in water. He mentioned Victor Schauberger and Masaru Emoto, the idea that water has memory and can sense things. Really good indeed. And that he talked about vortices. Now, I mentioned Schauberger in my talk on Thursday in Dorset, which you've probably seen by now. I'll probably upload that one first. And see, the Earth forms of we see the Earth as orbiting the Sun, and the Sun is like a static object in space, and the Earth is just like going round it, but the Sun doesn't move. Now, everything in space moves relative to other things. So relative to the Sun, of course, the Earth doesn't. Yet, the thing about it is, if you take because the Sun moves, in a sense, the galaxy, our particular galaxy, the Milky Way, is a spiral galaxy. Everything is like spinning around it. It looks like a Catherine wheel firework or hurricane, and it is is rotating around it, and it does so I think it's every 91 million years or something. The Earth goes around the galaxy, and therefore the planets and all the planets of the solar system follow the Sun as it orbits the galaxy, and it creates a kind of vortex pattern. It's very interesting. Never really thought about it like that. And he goes on to Wilhelm Reich, and of course that's when he talks about cloud busting and things like that, and he shows this little short film about Reich going to a farm somewhere in the Midwest United States, and he causes it to rain during a very long heat wave. And this happens sometime in the late 1940s. There's a very long heat wave, total dryness, and the farms were like in a really bad way. They couldn't, their crops were all dying, and so Reich turned up and with his cloudbuster, and he created rain clouds. And of course, that's what got him to the attention of the dark forces. Of course, wanted to shut him down like they do. They shut down people like that. He mentions the restart of CERN, and now, at the time of recording this, I'm planning on a live stream about that. In fact, I'm going to do it as soon as I get back home, because so much has been happening in this world. Boris Johnson has gone as Prime Minister, or he's about to. We've got, of course, the Georgia Guidestones have been blown up. That's got to mean something symbolically wonderful. And CERN, the Large Hadron Collider has started, and he mentions this. Harry mentions the Large Hadron Collider, but he also mentioned that when it went down for maintenance in 2018, he said at that time they were bombarding etheric cannons at it. Now, the etheric cannon is something similar to the cloudbuster, except it's a bit more complicated. It contains silk for some reason. Not sure why that was. As is often the case, I was struck by an attack of drowsiness, as so often happens at these conferences where I was dropping off. I just eaten lunch over at the pub, the Royal Oak, and I was just like, oh, like that. But it's an interesting talk, and I mean, I've got all his contact details are there, and of course I can watch the talks anytime I like, because Miles is producing them as videos, so I can go back and I can re-watch the talks. Kerry Cassidy, I've been speaking to, of course I had dinner with her and Miles and Neil last night, not last night, before last, Friday night, and had a nice conversation with her. And she was going to do some kind of presentation online, which I was going to help her with, but unfortunately nothing came of that, unfortunately. I think that was a bit of a pipe dream, but you never know, if it might go ahead at some point, maybe sometime today. I'll tell you more about today in a minute. She did, I think, maybe one of the best talks of the conference. Extremely positive. She's unashamedly pro-Q, and she went through the whole QAnon material. Now, the QAnon is controversial. Of course, the skeptics say it's all nonsense. Neil Sanders says it's a psyop. Richard D. Hall says it's a psyop, and things like that. And I know many people in the truth movement, including people I respect, people like Kev Baker, God rest him, who completely denounce Q as valueless. It's just a LARP. It's a con. I'm one of the people who doesn't hold to that, and I've done an entire video about that, which I couldn't even upload to YouTube. It was too controversial. It's on Alt Tech. And it's called Why QAnon is Real. Kerry's just done a really interesting talk on why QAnon is real. And not only that, she knows, for example, now this is something I've not really heard of before. My friend Viv talked about it a lot. I never really looked into it in detail, but Sean O'Savin, that the idea that he might be JFK Jr. Now, I'm convinced that JFK Jr. is alive. I'm convinced of that. Now, the last thing I heard, it was a guy called Vincent Fuchsia. But Kerry presents video evidence, photographic evidence, comparing photographs of O'Savin with John, and the similarity of their faces. Like, basically, Savin is an older version of what he looks. I say he took pictures of John and aged him 30 years. He's Sean O'Savin. John, of course, was apparently killed in a plane crash. He's probably the most famous member of the Clinton body count. Interestingly, this happened to him just as he made the decision to run to be Senator of New York. And guess who else wanted to be Senator of New York? Hillary Clinton. This was in the early 90s when Bill Clinton was president. And like many people who get in the way of the Clintons, he came to a sticky end. Just a coincidence, nothing to worry about. Jeffrey Epstein, of course, is the most recent member of the Clinton body count. I'm sure there's others planned. Ghislaine Maxwell, I think, well, let's just say, when she goes out in the prison yard for exercises, vultures start circling. But you see, and amazingly, I had this experience of listening to Kerry's talk about JFK Jr. and QAnon while I was sitting in the healing tetrahedron. It was an amazing experience. I was sitting there in the healing tetrahedron. I'd taken off my shoes and socks, and I was sitting there going, and then Kerry's doing this talk, and I felt an amazing, I did feel a flow of positive energy come into me. It was amazing. Now there was, the schedules were thrown a little bit. They were thrown a little bit skew whiff by the sad news that Professor Valentina couldn't make it. And it was not her fault. Basically, the bloody trains were, there was a load of trains were cancelled. I don't know if it was industrial action or whether it was a technical problem. There was only one train going from Paddington Station west on the westward Bristol line, and she tried to get on it and couldn't because it was overcrowded. So she just got on the train, went back home. It wasn't her fault. It wasn't her fault. It's a shame, but Miles was very upset, and as you saw, and everyone was disappointed by this. However, as always, you know, the show must go on, and indeed it did. There were other speakers, of course. Now, there was a decision to make it like a kind of open mic, an open mic session where several people had mini presentations, and I think they were people part of Karen's network. And now one of them came on stage, and there was a bit of an unpleasant scene because he showed this climate change video. It's just a short, like, climate change promotional video, and Miles got very angry, stopped the video, and told him to get out because he was promoting the idea that carbon dioxide emissions cause climate change. And this guy did go out. Now, I don't think that was the right thing to do. I mean, because I do believe that the whole climate change, man-made climate change things is a massive con. It is a massive con. But the solution when people say things like this and promote these sort of things, let them have their say, and then explain to them why they're wrong, rather than just getting angry with them and throwing them out. This guy is now far less likely to change his mind on climate change than he was before he went into this particular event. And let's be fair, he was asked to come on stage and give his opinion, and he gave it. So he should just been left alone, in my view. Anyway, Colin Woolford actually was a backup speaker apparently, and he did come and do his talk. And he talked about Star Wars. Now, Star Wars is interesting. Of course, it's a classic film franchise, which is, it's often been called a science fiction film. It's not science fiction. It's a space opera with science fictional elements. So it's similar to Dune, actually, which I reviewed before. In fact, George Lucas did admit that Dune had inspired him. Frank Herbert's book, when he came up with Star Wars. Now, Star Wars is actually very much like a fantasy. It actually has a lot of in common with sword and sorcery fantasy. It involves magic in the form of the Force, and there are swords in the form of the lightsabers. And the Jedi, of course, are like knights. In fact, they were called Jedi Knights originally. I've heard them referred to as Jedi Knights, and they are a kind of mystical order of that is very, very like, say, the Knights Templar. They carry out occult rituals, and they believe in a supernatural force, as I said. So Star Wars has a lot of, it's very medieval. It's very medieval in that sense. Indeed, politically and socially, it's much more like the medieval than most people's visions of the future, like as is Dune. You know, there's empires and things like that, rather than sort of enlightened democracies. You know, Colin Colin's interested in the naming of the characters. For example, Darth Vader. Darth sounds a bit like dark. Vader is interesting. Vader is written like vader, which, as Dutch speakers would know, means father. This is why from the very earliest time I started watching Star Wars, my parents kind of guessed that Darth Vader was going to turn out to be Luke Skywalker's father, because his name essentially means the Dark Father. And his real name, of course, is Anakin. And Colin wondered if Anakin had been inspired by the word Anunnaki. I mean, these are a little bit sort of esoteric, rather loose connections, and they're very much subjective interpretations of words. But is it possible? Perfectly, yes, it is. Princess Leia. Now, Colin, the name Princess Leia sounds like Pleiades. So Colin, we all know about the Pleiadians, these Carol Noonan and Soma Ara, of course, channels them. Leia, of course, is a young woman who is depicted always as wearing white. I think there's a couple of scenes where she doesn't wear white. I mean, for example, on Endor, she wears like camouflage fatigues, but generally she's seen wearing white. And that's, again, it's like a bride, it's like the Virgin Mary. It's symbolic of purity, especially sexual purity. Of course, there's a portrayal in The Empire Strikes Back. The Empire Strikes Back is often considered the finest Star Wars film. I'd have to agree, I think. One thing Colin didn't mention, which has always struck me since I've read the books, is how the act on Dagobah, in which Yoda teaches Luke the way of the Force, is straight out of Carlos Castaneda. Oh, good morning, Miles. We have... Oh, I'm not going to point the camera at Miles. Oh, all right, I will. You just come out of the bath, haven't you, old son?
No, no, no.
Oh, right.
I am pleased to announce to you that today we have special guests appearing at the Baseless Project grand opening ceremony, sponsored by the Fat Bastard Society and co-sponsored by the Baseless Society. We have two star guests giving their opinion on many important issues of the day. One is Mr. Fat Bastard himself, Mr. Ben F. Fluent, who talks shite, and the other one is Mr. Colon Woollyford from Barrow on Effluent on the River Ouse, and he talks shite as well. And they'll be opening the show today at the Baseless Project International Conference on the wrong side of the border. And you have heard this exclusive at extra charge of 50% surtax right here, right now.
Well, that's a bit of a spoiler, ladies and gentlemen.
That was definitely a spoiler.
Yeah.
That was definitely a spoiler. Reused toilet paper with the torrent of shite that comes out of these people's mouths. That because you're watching it now, you're missing this exclusive live discussion on today's politics.
There we are. Mr. Wet Hair Crop Circle Pyjamas has just come on to a subject I was going to come on to later. But he's told you what's going to happen next. Yeah, but anyway, going back to Star Wars, there is indeed a betrayal in Empire. As I said, first of all, it's a Judas-like betrayal in Empire Strikes Back. I mean, Empire Strikes Back is, I think, probably is my favourite as well of the Star Wars trilogy. I used to disagree, but I think, as I said, there's the scene. Colin didn't mention this, but it is very Carlos Castaneda. Yoda teaching Luke the Force is straight out of that particular series of books, which I'm guessing George Lucas read before he made the film. I myself didn't read the books until long after I'd seen the film, but it struck me immediately. Don Juan is like Yoda, and Carlos is like Luke. It's the middle of a trilogy is very rarely considered the finest, but it is the middle of the original trilogy. It has a story arc that is open at both ends, in other words. And the ending is The Empire Strikes Back is grim. It doesn't have a happy ending. It ends, of course, with Luke injured and mutilated and shocked that he's discovered that the Darth Vader is his father, Anakin. Ben Kenobi, of course, had told him that Anakin had been betrayed and murdered by Darth Vader. So yeah, and later on, there's an explanation. Kenobi does, it as a form of a Force ghost, does give Luke an explanation. Because there is a betrayal. Lando Calrissian, the governor of the Cloud City, an old friend of Han Solo. At the moment, he's very well acted by the actor who plays him. I can't remember his name, but he's a very, very good black actor. In the days before there were diversity hires, and anyone with dark skin could just come on a film and spout any old crap, and they say, "Oh, we're going to get the Bechdel test," you know. "Oh, yeah, well, we're not racist." Now, this guy actually earned his spurs as an actor. He's very, very good. And of course, he has this kind of slimy manner, this shifty manner to him originally at the start, and of course he betrays the heroes to the Empire. And of course at that point, Han is encased in carbonite. Now, of course, as we know, Lando does a backflip, and he eventually turns good and becomes a loyal companion of the heroes and one of the heroes himself. Yet, you know, this is the Judas betrayal, and which sometimes does end in redemption. I mean, this is like the Edmund character in Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. There are many, many other examples of the traitor who redeems himself. And as with the character in the C.S. Lewis character, the betrayer, he's portrayed sympathetically. Lando Calrissian is portrayed sympathetically. He tries to justify what he does for the sake of the safety of his people. And but of course, then what happens in the beginning of the third film, Return of the Jedi? You have a resurrection, don't you? You have a resurrection. Han Solo, well, he's not dead, he's encased in carbonite, but he's returned to animation by Leia, pretending to be a bounty hunter. What else is there? There's some of the creatures in it. There's these creatures called calamari, which of course is it's actually an Italian kind of shellfish, I believe, but it's also the name of these fish-like creatures in Star Wars. Now, there's the fish-like aliens have been found. The Nomo of the Dogon Sirius mystery fame are said to be fish-like. They're reported being fish-like, and they swim in liquid. Colin thinks that General Madine may be the Mahdi. Again, tying back to my own talk. There's Mon Mothma. Now, Mon Mothma is rather like Leia. She's the leader of the Rebel Alliance. But she's like Leia. She has this kind of like angelic quality to herself. She wears a white dress. She doesn't wear a uniform. She wears a white dress. She's an older woman, and almost like an older version of Leia. And the word Mon apparently is significant. I can't remember exactly all that, but Mothma, it's almost like mother. And of course you have Palpatine. You have Emperor Palpatine, who it's the most interesting thing about the original trilogies, which are not as good as the original Star Wars trilogy. Mind you, that was a very tough act to follow, wasn't it? One of the problems with achieving greatness in fiction is when you do it, your fans will be satisfied with nothing less. Emperor Palpatine's originally like a senator in the Republic who, through dirty tricks, finds his way into power, rather like Julius Caesar, and it assumes emergency powers. It's very critical of the 9/11 thing, which was very, very major when the original trilogy was created during the time of the beginning of the War on Terror. And so he's Darth Sidious, this Sith Lord. They're the Jedi's who become part of they're the fallen Jedi's from the dark side of the Force. He, of course, takes over the Republic in a state of emergency, creates the Empire, begins the Clone Wars, and that, of course, happens in real life. And people were struck by the fact that the popes. Now, the pope we have now doesn't get this sort of criticism, and it's as simple as the fact that he doesn't look as evil as popes tend to be. Yet the previous one, Pope Benedict XVI, he actually looked like Emperor Palpatine. People often compare the two and realise how similar they were, and I think that helped. Maybe that's why one of the reasons he abdicated. Anyway, interesting talks from yesterday. I'm looking forward to today. And as you just heard from the man himself, the first performance, because we don't have Professor Valentina anymore, she was going to do her own. She was going to do a double bill. I thought this might happen actually. I've been asked to step in and do an emergency performance, which I'm happy to do. And luckily, I don't have any other talk prepared, so except the Roswell one, which Miles won't tolerate. That's the one from Dorset. I'm going to do a dialogue with Colin, so it's going to be another Ben and Colin chat, which will be great. So that's what's coming up. Now, I must say, the Basis Project HQ has changed quite a bit since I last saw it. It's looking a lot more homely with these extra settees rather than the stools. As for decoration, there's a couple of new things. These pictures are new. I think that's Lloyd Canning. There's a lot of reflection there you can see on the pane, but on the
space, it's very important.
Is this Lloyd Canning, Miles? It's Flip Foster, 2001.
It's about
And there's the UFO Museum picture there. Those are new. Of course, there's the old space program thing. I think you've seen that before. And as you can see round here, again, it's actually a Persian rug. Who'd have thought it? You know, I always said the other Miles's home was really just a studio with a few bits of furniture put in, and anything that wasn't like electronic or made with wires and stuff looked completely out of place. But not anymore. Of course, it is still a studio, but it's also a home. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I am in the privileged position of riding pillion with Miles in the Milesmobile, and I'm just driving through this beautiful location here in Wiltshire. This village, greenery, barnyards. It's lovely, isn't it, Miles?
Yes. We're now going over the Kenneth and Avon Canal.
Right, let's see if I can get a picture of that. Well, we're a bit too low down, but it showed you lots of other things in this lovely area here. Oh, we're heading for Pusey. I've actually had to ride with Miles because, well, you know, because we're doing our effluent thing, aren't we? It's effluent.
No, it's not effluent. You are simply called Ben F. Fluent.
Ben F. Fluent. There's a pillbox. Oh, look at this. These are the highest points in Wiltshire. That's right. So I can't go with Jane today. I've got to go with Miles to get me to the place on time to do my thing with Colin Williford of Wire Piddle. Oh, so that's the next thing. Or are we going with Wire Piddle or Shitterton?
No, we're not using that. It's far too obvious.
Okay.
This is a culture program. We're not doing any cheap jibes involving base humour at the Baseless Project.
Alright. That's a perfect sky watching place up there, as you know. I've sky watched before. Okay, we're the first. This is what the auditorium looks like when you first arrive. We let's just walk in. It's literally just 5 seconds ago we all walked in. Matthew's here, Miles is here. You all know Matthew, yeah, and all the other crew are here. So, and I've just got to set up my stall, and then we'll get going.
Good morning. Welcome to day 3 of the Basis Conference 2022. Before we proceed with the scheduled programming, we do have 2 eminent gentlemen I'd like to introduce who are going to kick things off today in a rather serious tone. So I would like hush, because this, you know, things will get lively throughout the day. We're going to start in quite a serious tone this morning. So I would like to welcome these 2 eminent gentlemen. We have on my right here Mr. Ben Effluent, who's come from Will. He's come from Way on the Piddle this morning. And also Mr. Colin Williford, who's joining us all the way from Shitterford. So please, I will pass on to you gentlemen, over to you.
Amazing these place names where they come from. It's really remarkable. Straight off the list of rude place names. I took great interest in your talk yesterday. You mentioned mine a couple of times, because I think there is some intersection, which is basically that Star Wars is a very apocalyptic story, wouldn't you say?
yeah, a very eschatological, end times, and I don't see the end times as a bad thing. I think it's actually a positive thing. I think we're reaching the end of this cycle of time, which has been very negative. If you look at human history, it's actually been very traumatic. So millions and millions of people have died. But I do feel like something's coming to an end, and as you say, I think this is a positive thing, because we want to live in a world full of lies and deceit. So much is hidden from us, and we're dumbed down at every level. But I totally agree. There are very much what I would call the end of days, end of time, biblical revelation. I think all these things are relevant to the days that lie ahead of us. And I know you mentioned the Kali Yuga and stuff. And I think these are the days, as they say.
It is. It's strange. First of all, this theme is, as I said, it's a Jungian archetype of the apocalypse. Keeps recurring. Whether people exist, they have these ideas. And it doesn't matter what religion you believe in, or even if you have no religion, you still come up with these same. People will still come up with these same concepts. Well, what about Star Wars, of course, is I think it is a metaphor in a way for our own situation. And George Lucas is obviously a very perceptive man. I mean, he worked closely with John Carpenter, for instance, who is totally switched on.
I just wanted to add something to the talk. I don't think I made clear enough yesterday, in hindsight, looking back at it, and that was when I started talking about the Islamic part of it. I referred to one of the, we talked about Mon Mothma, this supreme leader of the Rebel Alliance, and then I've got the Mon Calamari, and then these sort of amphibious aquatic beings I say are connected to Sirius, and then there was also this other character, human, this General Crix Medine. I made reference to the crucifix, but the important thing there for me was the Mahdi, and I know you brought up this Mahdi thing, and the thing I didn't make clear that the guy who had this, who generated this whole information about the Dome Away, the Daughters of Mary, to emphasise that person, he claimed he was the Mahdi. He was actually the Mahdi. That's a controversial thing to say, and there's all that ET correction. But that person who was having a dialogue with Tony in Canada via his mailbox, it turns out that he says, and there's a whole host of stuff. Again, if you Google the Dome Away, not Dome Away, because we found that didn't come up, but if you put the Doma, D-O-M-A way, he was the eschatological. I mean, I know you talked a bit about the Mahdi, and that's the kind of controversial thing, because I'm not sure how many people in the Islam religion, I mean, they're familiar with the jinn and things like that.
They are indeed. I mean, like many of these sacred texts, this all comes out of the Abu Dawud Hadith, which describes this end time, this eschatological vision. And as with the Book of Revelations, it has words and phrases that could be interpreted in different ways. It's not like it's not really a logical text. It's quite abstract and poetic in a way, but it's clear about the role of that the Mahdi would be some kind of special person who came onto the earth to redeem humanity, and it wouldn't be the role that Jesus played, but it would pave the way for Jesus to reappear.
Yeah, because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Islamic texts actually do make reference to Jesus and Mahdi being sort of working for the same team. And I've been like the whole Admiral Akbar being, the Akbar being, God is great.
That's another one.
Which is very interesting. And people don't really talk about, why have these people got these, these peculiar names. But it's fascinating. So there's definitely stuff.
It's not accidental.
It's not. It can't be accidental. And as I said about the Mon thing, the hidden God type thing, and then the dual nature of the human and possibly extraterrestrial, divine, half man, half something else, some otherworldly being. It's just fascinating. But I think the key point to take out of it is that we're all one, basically. So you can be, like I said, I made reference to all the Jesus stuff with Han Solo, the Solomon connection and things like that, and Pleiades. But all these religious texts, I don't see, we can all be divided by colour and things like that and different belief systems, but I do believe that these people were sent here for a core reason, to bring enlightenment, and we just weren't ready for it. As I said in my talk, we weren't ready to accept these people. The information was just too much for us to take on, so it's just like little stepping stones to see society, and I think that's happened with art further down, since these great teachers like Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, whatever your views on them, and a lot of it has been distorted, so we may not even know the original
what their actual, there was no religion before these people came. It's all sort of invented.
But that's a good thing, like not believing in any of these specific religions. You can perhaps get a better view of all of them and the comparative mythology within them. But an actual adherent to the various religions wouldn't. They wouldn't have seen. But this, like I said, because I'm not a believer in these religions, I can probably interpret these texts as being written by mortal men who, in a sense, were not necessarily inspired by the divine. They no more than the rest. In a sense, we're all divine. We all are sons of God, or daughters of God. But it wasn't some kind of special message from God, and that the prophets weren't necessarily just simply being dictated to by the divine. Yet it's more like they were influenced by this archetype. And indeed, you mentioned the gin. I want to come off that in a minute, but I should point out that Kerry's talk, which I found very inspiring. I was actually sitting in the tetrahedron listening to Kerry talk about Q, and I know this is controversial. Probably a lot of you in this audience probably didn't go along with that, and indeed won't go along with my position or Colin's position on this. But it was wonderful to hear Kerry talk positively about Q. The QAnon situation is another apocalyptic part of the apocalyptic. It's an upwelling of this apocalyptic archetype. Whether it's true or not.
Well, it's certainly working out.
It's a manifestation of that instinct.
I've heard a lot of people say it's been compromised, but many people will say that there was a genuine, truthful nature at the beginning, and so it doesn't really matter if it has been compromised now, because there was something to it at the beginning, and obviously that was the intention, and it did wake up, many millions of people and got them to think in different ways. So I know things can be co-opted, and we know these subjects. There's people who sort of sow misinformation, and it can be a real minefield. And you studied ufology over the last 30 years, but you really have to read as many books as you can and go to as many talks. That's what I went to so many of these conferences in America. I'd sit for them all because I felt like they all had pieces of the puzzle, all had answers to the big picture. So the more people I heard, and then I just used my intuition and read books and that. But you have to go through all the disinformation, and there's a lot of disappointment involved in this subject. But it doesn't stop me from believing that there are core truths.
Exactly. And when it comes to disinformation, there are certain individuals who literally now do nothing else with their social media presence than try to pick holes in the characters of other people within our community. And their entire output is about generating drama from that. And they literally accuse everyone, and I mean everyone, of being shells. Everyone except them is working for the bad guys. Or they're scammers and grifters and things like that. And that I think is another form of the same attitude that has led to basically the skeptics.
Divide and rule is also very beneficial for the powers that be. How many people's lives have been ripped apart by the last 2 years just because they haven't decided to have a vaccine or something like that, and arguments within family and not being able to travel. It's a real nightmare out there for people, moral decisions to make and standing your ground, and it's not easy if you have family members. This is just on things like vaccines, but you can see that people have these arguments about all sorts of alternative view subjects. You might be a believer in the 9/11 conspiracy, but not in other things. There's so much stuff you could have arguments with people of, I think the main thing is that we all question everything, basically.
I suppose my advice would be not to try and be tolerant of others who disagree. This is what I was very fond of Kev Baker. He did live long enough to see my video called "Why QAnon is Real," which is a pretty unequivocal title, but we could sort of have a laugh about it afterwards. I've even got people, I know people who believe in flat Earth. I'm a very dedicated roundhead, but I know people who believe in the flat Earth. But they're not shills, they're not agents, they get some things wrong. We in our community should know better, I think. We should show them.
It's healthy to question everything. I'm not particularly, I'm not a flat earth by any means, but I do accept that there's so much about the planet we don't know, like the North and South Poles and things like that. Inner Earth, a lot of people don't go along with that. I actually do believe in that whole Inner Earth, Shambhala, Agartha, that there's these Inner Earth people, and maybe that's something I should have mentioned yesterday, because I don't believe it's just people in the orbit of this planet. I believe there is this, maybe since this deluge, since Atlantis, that people you know, there are these inner Earth, Yuggoth and Shambhala, and maybe it's these people we'll meet, not necessarily, you know, some sort of first contact of extraterrestrials, but it could well possibly be where we might actually meet the inner Earth people before we actually meet the outer Earth people.
The inner terrestrials, that's like sub-terrestrials. I mean, it's a wonderful idea, and I do believe there's a large amount of whether the Earth is hollow. I don't accept that, but I do accept the Earth has many cavities within it, within the crust, in which all kinds of things can be, both artificial and natural cavities. Now, you brought up the jinn earlier on. The jinn exist in Middle Eastern mythology. They're found. It talks about in Islam, and Muslims often talk about the jinn. If you get somebody who knows Muslim and ask them about the jinn, they'll probably talk to you for a very long time. But they are actually pre-Islamic, and they come out of that region from before Muhammad. But what they describe are beings that live in a parallel world made of smokeless fire. Basically, the word genie, the genie in the lamp, genie comes from jinn, and they can be contained within structures such as bottles, lamps, oil lamps, things like that.
So one person's jinn would be another person's shadow person in some ways, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think these things are related, and indeed encounters with extraterrestrials. I think some of these extraterrestrials might be jinn. I do believe in beings from other planets. I believe that aliens are actually more than one phenomenon that we've generically categorised under a single label.
Absolutely, yeah.
But in a sense, we also have like beings outside the Middle East. There are beings such as demons and angels, which are supernatural beings that they either have a very benevolent or malevolent.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can go in the whole Bible stuff, you know, the reference, you know, the Book of Enoch and Ezekiel and all that stuff. Clearly, they sort of were interpreting these things as angels and demons, because that's the only thing they will really know about from those books. And but yeah, for anyone else, that would be their version of extraterrestrials. But in their own ways, maybe you know, angels and demons sort of that's what they maybe are to many people, because some of them seem to be very negative. A lot of them just seem to be totally neutral, and maybe some are positive. But I guess we can't just label all these ET races. I guess it's all of the above, isn't it?
Yeah. Exactly. Some of them we consider very benevolent. We call angels. The one we consider malevolent, we call demons. But there's everything in between, the neutral ones. And indeed, this brings us back to Star Wars, because what is for example, the positive Force ghosts like Obi-Wan and Yoda, and at the end, Anakin comes back as a Force ghost.
Yeah.
They are like angels, aren't they?
Well, yeah. I mean, you remember the scene where in you know, the Star Wars: A New Hope, the original film, you know, when Ben Kenobi confronts you know, he's sort of the Darth Vader, who he taught in a way before he turned to the dark side. He sort of starts this battle, lightsaber battle on the Death Star, and Luke and the others come running, you know, to see this battle take place. But sort of Ben just totally, you know, he just puts his lightsaber down and he just disappears from his cloak. He's left on the floor. It's almost,
it's an assumption.
It's like he's, you know, taking the high ground or ascended. You could say he ascended or phased out of this reality. His body was no there. When, you know, when Darth Vader's touching his cloak, he's left his body. And for some people, that could be, you know, what's seen as like an ascension, or at least he took, you know, the moral high ground. He didn't want to fight. You know, I think a lot of it, you can interpret a lot of information and symbolic messages from various things in the films, but you know, one of the great ones is to not to engage with people, not to fight them, because you know, if you take away, you know, one half of the battle, then there's no battle, is there really? I mean you can still obviously defend yourself and things like that, and I'm not saying people just lie down and don't take the battle to people.
Well, I think it's Mark Twain. Mark Twain, I think, said, never argue with the immoral, because they'll drag you down to their level and they'll beat you with experience. It's very true. But it implies, first of all, that the Sith are not resurrected as Force ghosts. I mean, Obi-Wan says you'll cease to exist if I beat you. But I mean, that's I think something that maybe I don't quite know how to interpret that in the sense, because it contradicts things that are said by Darth Sidious and people like that. But I want to bring on another element of Star Wars. I mean, you didn't bring this up in your talk, but it's something that I've always wondered. I'd love to get your take on it.
Empire Strikes Back, it's an open-ended story. It's the middle of a trilogy. So it's open at the beginning, open at the end. It's rare within a trilogy that people consider that to be kind of like the best. But it is. I mean, it's one of the... I consider it the best, having thought it over a lot. I think it is. For example, you have the Force Ghosts. I mean, which of course... The Force Ghosts are very, very prevalent in that. They communicate with each other, not just with...
So when Luke's going to Dagobah to train, he sees like Ben Kenobi, then comes back as a, like you say, and sort of, you know, when Yoda's trained. And I didn't talk about Yoda yesterday, but that's sort of in part 2 of the talk. So if you're wondering how did he mention Yoda and all that shamanic stuff he says, that's in sort of part 2, which I'll be talking about in Watford. But yeah, there's much there. And there's that other scene on Dagobah where Luke faces himself in that cave, do you remember? And it's very profound stuff, because it turns out that his greatest enemy actually, turns out that it's not Darth Vader. When he kills this person who it's actually his face that's revealed.
It's very symbolic, and you see this in other things like Terry Gilliam's Brazil has a scene in it which is almost exactly the same.
Yeah.
But now I'm almost certain that George Lucas must have read Carlos Castaneda. I mean, I didn't realise this because I actually read Carlos Castaneda myself long after I saw Empire Strikes Back. But the scenes in the act on Dagobah with Yoda and Luke are almost certainly inspired by those books about Don Juan, this Yaqui Indian who he meets up this guy called Carlos Castaneda and teaches him the shamanic ways, and it's so like Yoda. And
I mean, I pulled out I mean, I didn't show it yesterday, but so many great quotes from Yoda that you could attribute it to that same sort of wisdom, sort of wise word teachings from so many people, and I know a lot of people resonate with Yoda, that sort of wise one, and that sort of when some sort of like a master yogi or whatever. Maybe that's something where the word comes from. There's so much more to sort of take away from the Star Wars characters, but I feel like I've probably only done like half of it, if that. There's so many. I could talk about Qui-Gon Jinn as well, like some of these other characters, and even Jar Jar Binks I give a mention to. But a lot of elements people get sort of worked up about, and there's some real fanboys and on the internet, and there are people that argue all day long about, this is rubbish, this isn't canon, the Force Awakens. And there's loads of views, but it's, at the end of the day, it's all art, and as long as it's portraying positive messages, the battle between light and dark. It's the same as Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter. I always bring this up, but these stories are actually all pretty much the same, really. It's all sort of a beginning, middle, and an end. And it's really the same story. It's like the good coming over, the evil, and the hero's journey. And it's not so much the destination as the journey itself. As we said this weekend, a few conversations. It's all about going on that journey.
And having the angelics, the supernatural side, I really appreciate that they do bring us in. It's a spiritual, supernatural story with the Force Ghost. I mean, I think this may inspire me because there is, for those of you who've read my books. Roswell Rising, a novel of disclosure, available at all good bookshops now, price £10, on my stall, where I'll sign it for you, and it's 2 sequels. You'll know that I include that element, rather controversially I include that element. I wasn't actually sure whether to introduce my character, the one I call Flying Buffalo. I cogitated for a while about leaving him out, because I thought this is not necessary for the story, but I decided no, I'll put him in there. And it's somehow it works. I think I'm glad I did that. But there's like Star Wars has like a more sort of down to earth, I would say, political analysis element to it. Especially, and people slag off the prequel trilogy, and then I'm sure they're not as good as the originals. But it has that very, very clever element of political satire.
Yeah, which could be seen as really stuffy in that, but. Again, it's in the second part. I talk about how interesting the whole political thing is, and how Darth Sidious was pulling the strings. He was seen as like, this great sort of chancellor person behind the scenes, but he was really sort of double agent working for the dark side. I think that did put off a lot of people. I remember flying to New York in, I think it was '99, to watch The Phantom Menace. Had such high expectations, and I think we watched it at one of the big theatres out there where Star Wars may have originally been on or something, and I just remember going there with some friends and like falling asleep during it. It was like, oh my god, this isn't good. But in its own way, you know, there's bits you can take from the Phantom Menace, you know, and even just the titles. I talk about Star Wars, but like the whole names, like the Phantom Menace, which can be viewed as anything as the Phantom Menace, and the clone, you know, Attack of the Clones. We know we've got all this information about clones now, and yeah, there's so much you can actually take from these names, even just the basic names. Like I say, it's all there in front of you, really.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with achieving, one of the problems I think Lucas faced was when you achieve greatness, your fans will never be satisfied with anything less. Which meant that the prequels inevitably were going to be placed under enormous scrutiny to see how closely they matched.
And people view things as a child. Like I said, I think I was maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 when I first saw Star Wars. And obviously, there's that magic then, and everything that goes with it. You know, you've got the toys and everything, and the figure, you know, the figures, Star Wars figures, and all, everything. And you know, there's some real hardcore collectors out there, and it's worth, you know, there's literally thousands and thousands of pounds all this stuff now. But you know, the legacy of this, it will never die just because those original films were, you know, real works of art.
I think as standalone movies, all of them are pretty good. I mean, even like the last 3, which were really, I didn't enjoy the last 3, but it's still as standalone movies. They still have.
It's a space opera. It's a spectacular. I mean, the music and sound. I mean, John Williams' soundtrack. I mean, where would it be with that absolutely amazing soundtrack? I know he did like Indiana Jones and a whole host of other films, but you just, you know, you can take that for granted, but really, you know, music stirs the soul, and without that, and the amazing special effects they used at the time, you know, they were using models. So much stuff now is, you know, computer generated, and it just, you know, really stood out for me. I just wanted to bring up one thing I also didn't talk about yesterday, was the Force, the whole idea of the Force, which is arguably the most important thing in Star Wars, the concept of the Force and the Jedi Knights, but I find it's like an interchangeable word with the Source. So they could have used the word, and I make this joke when I've done this talk before, but they could have called it the Source, but I think if they said use the Source, it would be like, you know, Heinz Ketchup would be taking on that, and then, you know, and then using it for themselves. So maybe it was more appropriate they use the word Force, but I do kind of find that, you know, these words sort of, you're taking energy, you know, you're all part of the source, so to use the source energy is like using our own creation powers, so, and tapping into it. I think that's our own mystical ability to connect, and, you know, like with psychic phenomena and like, you know, clairvoyance, things like that, you know, they have these, you know, force powers where they, like Luke Skywalker at the end of Empire Strikes Back, he has a vision of Luke, Princess Leia, and Bespin being, you know, and Luke Skywalker and rather Han Solo in trouble. So he gets this vision, and that's why he flies off from Dagobah. So he's starting to get all these gifts. It's like the more spiritual and aware he's becoming, he's been giving sort of these almost psychic powers. So it's all very interesting.
And it's a strange how there's, you know, Morpheus in Matrix says walking the path is different to knowing the path. And we have like an element of deception, which is in a way positive, because, for example, the Oracle in the Matrix says to Neo, "You're not the one. It's not you." But then we realise that that's what Neo had to think in order to act. And of course, Yoda, when Luke goes off to save his friends on Bespin, when Lando betrays them, they walk into a trap. Yoda tries to talk him out of it. Says, "No," and he says,
ready yet.
"Yeah, that's that line." He says, "Even if it means, what if it means sacrificing my friends?" He says, "Yes, if necessary, you should sacrifice your friends." He says, "I can't do it." And it could be that, and then there's this conversation between the Force Ghost of Ben, Kenobi, and Yoda. You get the sense that they have, in a sense, guided him into that decision itself. And when he returns to complete his training, Yoda, who's on his deathbed, says, "No more training do you need. You just must face your very own."
Yeah, exactly.
As if that was the right thing for Luke to do. Compassion for his friends was part of being a Jedi.
Yeah, it can be very hard to act all spiritual when your friends and family are under attack. It's, you know, you have to reach a certain level of mastery not to rise to any sort of thing like that. But yeah, I think that's what happened. Like you say, Return of the Jedi, he sort of had reached that level. He had learned the lessons and become much more powerful. Hence, he was then able to defeat. And as I said, I think that's a metaphor. I believe Luke Skywalker is a metaphor for mankind, and the dark aspect, the father aspect, is the one that's been running this planet for at least the last 12,000 years. Yeah, that's not to say that we're totally, you know, the children of negative extraterrestrials, because I do believe there's obviously positive groups that have been involved before then. It's just that the Anunnaki, as portrayed by Anakin, have been pretty much controlling this planet for at least the last 12,000 years.
Now, on the subject of the character names, I mean, Luke, of course, is one of the apostles of Jesus, one of the authors of the Gospel, the four Gospels, and Skywalker, just to walk in the sky, to ascend. And indeed, at the end of the trilogy, he does ascend. It's like I describe it as an assumption. Assumption meaning like to be the assumption of Mary, because at the end of her life, Mary, the mother of Jesus, didn't die. She was assumpted into heaven. They call it an assumption. How are we doing for time?
Well, that's it. I think that's all up for time. But I want to thank you, Ben, and appreciate you us having this conversation. And look forward to our next cosmic conversation about subjects in the future. But thanks, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. And I guess it's time for a break.
Yeah, that went well, didn't it?
Thank you, gentlemen, of the Basement Society. We'll be starting shortly with Gloria Moss, who will be joining us. So remain seated, we're going to get sorted, and Gloria will be joining us up on the stage in 5 minutes.
Guys, I'm in the Royal Oak again. This is the beer garden of the Royal Oak, which you'll recognise. It's extremely hot today. It's like, I don't know what the temperature is, but has anyone heard?
It's going to be up in the 20s.
Yeah, it's got
26,
26, 27. Yeah, it's really very warm today. There's a bit of cloud that's appeared. Still no chemtrails. But basically, Michael Shrimpton spoke. Before him, it was Dr. Gloria Moss, who's very interesting. I'll tell you more about her later. And Michael Shrimpton, well, the Germans did it. You know the story. And before that, it was me and Colin, which you've seen. So this is like it's turning out to be an interesting final day of the Basis Project Conference. Okay, guys, we've got the Daily Star. Oh, God, once again, this is an irresistible buy. And as always, they come up with the most amazing ufological headlines. It's not the Sasha Christie this time. It's actually... It's this guy, Dave Davis, of the Kinks. Kinks legend, Dave Davis, revealed his saucy ET invasion. Kink aliens really got me. Oh, my God.
We didn't mind.
They force froze his groin and banned him for having sex.
Yeah.
No, I think that's
alien.
That's more likely to be too much drugs, mate. Here we go. Anyway.
There you go. Yeah.
Oh, bloody heck. Kingstar says aliens hit him with a sex ban all day all day. Oh no!
Yeah, Matthew's on his
75-year-old rocker, his mind was taken over and he heard voices in his head.
It's worth saying just for his drone footage.
My groin and pelvis suddenly became numb.
Those are urban explorers, but he used to make crop circles. Matthew, the young guy, he's on the 80s.
They told me they wanted to transmute my sexual energy to a higher vibration.
Yeah, I'm sure he's done all that.
Well worth £1.40, wasn't it?
Probably very interesting.
Aliens told me I must quit sex. Mate. Where did you get? Oh my God! I'll be following you in a minute. See you in a minute, Julia. Oh my God! What the fuck?
Well worth a £1.40 purchase.
I sometimes think, these newspapers, they know when these conferences are happening. They really do, and they put these bloody things out deliberately.
Yeah, I've noticed that
on there, selling it off, nothing to see here. Tried that for a number of years. In the end, we proved that they were doing stuff there. In the end, they dropped the facade, and now they spent £600 million, probably more like £1 billion on this base, and it is second only to GCHQ. This is an aerial photo of the disused base and the registry. Round the corner, we go into some of the buildings which we think are more than likely to have been where the guys who, maybe the men in black, where they worked. You see, it's all been smashed up by the kids. That's Steve.
We're using a guy called Dr. William Baldwin's principles, which don't really work that well because they go off IMR movements where your hands twitch. And sometimes people's hands will twitch, but in general, you've just got to use your...
Now, unfortunately, the people who they had a lovely stall here with orgonite and books and things, it's gone. I meant to get a shot of that stall and I didn't, which was a big mistake. I'll just show you this. Stall now. This is Sandra de Roy's book. Yeah, she's here. She's around here somewhere. But as you can see here,
Another colourful lady.
she's got black hair. She'll be back in a minute. This is Sandra de Roy. It should say so on there. Here's, you can see, just take that. I'll take
It's very announcing the word on the way.
I, like everyone else, and I'm sure you do, get very frustrated because, you know, we're still in a minority at the moment. And things will have to get worse before they get better, and that's the whole idea. And the thing is that this is a huge conscious...
How many hours have you filmed?
I'm not sure, man, not sure. Well, I'm leaving, the window's open because it's very hot. I'm in Julianne's catchback, which is much more comfortable than the Milesmobile, although slightly not quite as fast, but I can sacrifice comfort before speed any time. We've got Tony with us.
Speed up if you like. Go speed up if you like.
Here we go, we're going back to Devices for one last night on the town. Yeah. Devices, lock up your daughters. Good morning everyone, it's Monday morning here at the Basis Project headquarters, and the conference is over. Oh, my goodness me, it's always a bit of a come down when that happens, isn't it? I mean, I know I keep repeating myself on this point, but it's true. The conference, the energy in the conference is so intense. It's quite draining, actually. It's emotionally overwhelming at times, and at the end, it's really a hard stop, isn't it? The last speaker goes off the stage. We say our big thank yous, and we start putting the chairs away. And before you know it, Bouverie Hall has turned back into whatever it was before, and we're all a bunch of people wandering around, wondering what the hell we're going to do. And all of us have to face the prospect within a few hours to 24 hours, we're going to be back in our normal lives, talking to normie people and things like that. And that talking to normie people and things brings us on to the subject of the first speaker, or the second speaker after Colin and I did our little dialogue. I, Ben F. Emlyn-Jones, and Colin Woollyford of Wire on the Piddle, did this. Dr. Gloria Moss. Now, there was a bit of uncertainty about whether she was going to turn up, because there was all kinds of lurid stories coming out of London about the entire tube network shutting down, the Great Western Railways having some kind of massive meltdown, strike, walkouts, industrial accidents, someone nicking the railways for scrap metal, that kind of thing. But she put in her appearance, and she did. I had a little discussion with her because I brought this up in the Q&A as well. She's a psychologist. Now, I know. Have I gone blurry? Come on, Ben. Have I gone blurry? Sorry if I'm going blurry, guys. Autofocus seems to have lost its oomph. Come on. Oh, that's better, that's better. Right, sorry about that. My camera's having a little hiccup. My camera's actually getting very old, so I'm going to have to replace it. I've real trouble charging it up, actually. The line, which is where you plug in the charger, doesn't always work. Anyway, she's a psychologist, and as you know, when I hear the word psychologist, I tend to recoil the way a priest in the Middle Ages hears the word witch. But psychology is like all things, it's a sword that can be beaten into plowshares. It's been used as a terrible weapon, a horrific weapon against the population of the earth. But at the same time, it could be used for beneficial purposes in the hands of the right person. And I think Dr. Gloria Moss is the right person. She's her speciality is personnel management. That's where she works. I wonder if she ever met Isabel Menzies-Lythe. If she did, I don't think those two would get on. And she was concerned about psychopaths. Now, she draws on several sources for this, and I'm very pleased that she mentions Thomas Sheridan, because he's another excellent person who deals with this kind of subject. In fact, I have interviewed him myself on this matter on Panmo Radio. And she probably did as we all do. We learned at an early age that people exist in our society who appear to be destructive and not care about the destruction they wreak. You get your first taste or your introduction to the psychopathic mindset or the presence of psychopaths in society probably when you're at school. It'll be a teacher at your school, most likely. And she did say there were people there were people in the local, say the local education authority she came across, who would walk in schools and start shouting at the teachers and calling them names and things like that in front of the class of children or in front of other members of staff. That is, that of course is completely improper. It's unprofessional. It's cruel. It's abuse. It is psychological abuse, and it's disturbing to see how so few staff members actually complained about that. I think this is something to do with the Zimbardo experiment. I've just actually got myself a film about that. The Zimbardo experiment was a very disturbing social experiment carried out in the 60s, I believe, by a guy called Dr. Zimbardo, in which he took some people, just ordinary people, and he made them role play as if they were in a prison. Some would be the warders and some would be the prisoners. And the experiment had to be stopped because the people sort of, they fell too easily into their roles to the point where those assigned as officers were abusing the prisoners. They actually kick in, punching the inmates and things like that. And the inmates didn't complain about it as if they felt that was their lot in life. She talks about something called the psychopathic control grid, and then she says she tries to make a connection between what she calls psychopaths and the non-awoke. The non-awoke being people who I would describe as normies. She didn't mention the NPC. Now I wish I'd had a chance to ask her about the NPC meme. You may have seen the NPC meme. It's a joke, you know, the sort of Wojak grey-faced figure with just matchstick men eyes and mouth. It's a meme, and it refers to people who appear to have no internal dialogue. Now this is a controversial and quite recent adaptation to sort of pop's amateur psychology. But there are certain people, and quite a large number of people, they may even be the majority, who have, when studied over a long period of time, many of them through interviews and things like that, they appear to be unable to think, and in the sense of if you define thinking as the ability to, if you define thinking as the ability to internally cogitate, that is, sit and actually mull things over in your mind. Now I can do that. A lot of people can, but it seems there are a certain number of people who can't do that. They literally cannot do that. Now this is very worrying because I mean I personally, when I'm given some kind of piece of information, I can think it over, I can think about it, I can subject it to some kind of internal test it against in a logical way against other things within my memory. And now a lot of people can't do this. They can now they can change their minds, but they can't change their minds without some kind of external mental stimulus. Which means if they watch TV and they see a piece of propaganda, they literally cannot disbelieve it until someone shows them something that contradicts it. But NPCs are not. NPCs can feel compassion, they can feel empathy, they can feel guilt. They're not psychopaths, but Dr. Moss wants to compare the psychopath to the non-awoke. She talks about Dr. Robert Hare. Now he's written several books on this matter. There's been literature on psychopaths dating back now to 1941 with the publication of Mask of Sanity, which is I think the first book on psychopathology. But Dr. Robert Hare's written some more, and no one uses the term pseudo-psychopath. No, I don't know if he does. Dr. Moss, and the term pseudo-psychopath is one that I've invented. It means somebody who is a non-psychopath but is compelled through propaganda, usually they're NPCs, is compelled through propaganda, peer pressure and other external mental stimuli to exhibit psychopathic behaviour. The classic one being the police officer who behaves in a brutal way even though he doesn't really want to, he obeys orders. You know, or the man about town who goes around having lots of casual sex with women and possibly harming them psychologically because, well, that's just the way it goes, that's what guys do. Or the bully who picks on a kid at school and beats him up and just says, well, it's a dog-eat-dog world, mate. That's the law of the jungle, you know, the Charles thing. That's an example of pseudo-psychopaths. Real psychopaths never try to justify their actions. They don't need to. Pseudo-psychopaths have to justify. They can behave as badly as psychopaths, but they have to justify what they do. They have to find some kind of... And even if it's a false justification, they have to find that. Now, she mentions the Myers-Briggs personality inventory. This is a psychopath. This is a psychological test by which people can be categorized into certain groups. I think there are, I don't know, so many. There are 8 different factors within a person's personality, and there are different combinations of each of those. Now, and she talked about, I know what my Myers-Briggs personality type is because I've had a Myers-Briggs test. I am ENFJ. And that's just go to the Myers-Briggs website for more explanation of what that means. And Dr. Moss gives a full explanation in her talk, which of course is on Miles's Brighteon channel. But probably by the time you watch this, it will be on his Brighteon channel. All these talks, by the way, you can get on the Basis Project website and Brighteon, the channel there. They're too hot for YouTube, mind you. So I'm ENFJ, and I was told by the person who gave me this test that I would make the perfect politician. ENFJs are very often get into politics. That, to me, is an insult. Of course, I'd be a terrible politician. I'd be too honest. What she described is the important... She wanted to make a comparison between people in the truth movement, people she meets with... Because she's a member of Stand in the Park, bless her. And she did Myers-Briggs tests on her fellow Stand in the Parkees. And she found that something very interesting. Even though there was an equal number of E's and I's, which that really didn't seem to, the E and I thing didn't seem to be a factor. The last 3 letters, NFJ, and NF, the last 3 letters were very important. In my case, NFJ. Now, what she's described is my personality type is not quite typical for someone in the truth movement, but it's almost there. She said because I have, well, she wasn't addressing me now, but she was addressing generally. She addressed the population, and she said a large number of people for example, who become conspiratorially aware are NF. The 2 middle letters NF are very important. I can't remember what those things stand for. You can look them up at the Myers-Briggs website, or you just watch Miles's video on this matter. NFs, there was so many. He said over 75% of them had NF in the middle of their Myers-Briggs 4-letter characteristic. Now the majority also had P at the end. The last letter was P. Mine is J. Now P and J, these are the 2 factors there. You can be either P or J. As I said, you look at Miles's video or the website to find out what these things stand for. Now in this case, I am atypical of a truther because most truthers are P. In fact, I was sitting next to a lady and talking to her, and she did a Myers-Briggs thing during the course of the talk, and she was ENFP, so she's almost the same as me, but she has a P instead of a J. So being ENFJ makes me almost the perfect politician. Perfect politician. It doesn't make me the perfect politician apparently, but it also means I'm almost typical of a truth movement personality, with the exception of the J. When you go across the entire population, you'll find that the NFs are quite low. I think it's as part of the general population, the NFs are 7% or something. Ps are like 4%. Now, this indicates that there's a reason. Now, this indicates that Dr. Moss says it may not be possible for large proportions of the population to accept the reality of the truth movement, and she gives the example of War of the Worlds. It's estimated 6 million people listened to Orson Welles' famous radio play, which was a docudrama, essentially one of the earliest examples of a docudrama. And I believe it was some kind of psychological test, actually, even though Orson Welles did have to go to court over it because of all the damage done, people injured, car crashes, shops looted, things like that. But that famous incident in 1938, when that hit the airwaves, about 6 million people heard it. in the United States, and 1 million of them were involved in this, oh my god, the aliens are invading, we've got to get out of town thing. Now that's NPC behaviour. The person sees a piece of propaganda, they don't, and they're unable to actually interpret it as something not real. And it's true that you could be forgiven for mistaking a docudrama for something real. Indeed, I have done too. And by the time you watch this, you'll have seen the video I'm making about that. I'm about to make a video about that. But there's people like who watch soap operas, and then they meet the actor who plays some evil person in a soap opera, and they'll go up and they beat that person up. I remember there was this guy. There was a guy who played some evil character in EastEnders who was abusing one of the popular characters, and they went up to him and they started kicking and punching. That's how you treat Michelle really badly and things like that. No, we're dealing here with people who literally can't tell facts from fiction. They watch Tavistock Enders and they believe it's the real. They can't discern that it's not real. They don't understand that it's not real. Now that is very worrying. That's quite common. Art Malik, and he's a British Asian actor. He played a very unpopular character. I think it was in Jewel in the Crown or something. I can't remember. He was attacked on the street as well. That was back in I think in the 80s. Paul Scott's Jewel in the Crown, the famous TV drama. And she also talks about normal versus the elites. Now that normies, like I said, tend to have low NF and P. But when you get up into the high levels, like for example CEOs and things like that, it's even lower. And what's more, among the Illuminati, God knows. I know that Brian Gerrish has talked and Thomas Sheridan have talked about psychopaths within the elite. But of course, Dr. Moss is positive and believes there are solutions. Now, 363-degree feedback. This is one of her solutions when she was working in personnel. That is, appraisals of management will be done by interviewing not just their superiors, but their inferiors. I think that's a good idea. Of course, there are problems with that. There were some people who just resent any authority figure in their life. There were porters like who just hated every head porter we had. This is simply because they didn't like anyone who told them what to do. Which meant they really shouldn't have been hospital porters in that case, because when you're a hospital porter, you have to take orders, and so long as those orders are reasonable and they're done in a polite, respectful manner, I'm willing to take any. I was willing to take any order necessary for my duties. Also, there's a recruitment and promotional filter based on knowledge of the psychopathic personality. And inclusive leadership, she mentioned. I can't remember what that. I've made a note. Inclusive leadership. Now, she mentions President Havel of the Czech Republic. Now, he apparently is one of these. I don't know much about him. I know he was the first post-communist Czech leader in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, whenever that was, when the breakdown of the Soviet system led to the democratizing of Eastern Europe. He apparently has something called Living Truth. He wrote a book called Living Truth. I'll have to look into that. Now, I'm a bit to see a problem with all these psychological tests, and I did ask her this question, and she did take my point about there being the need for some kind of meta-analysis, because I have done psychological tests before. I've written several articles on Panmo Voice about this. I took a test for empathy. A test in which anyone who scores over 15 is described as hyper-empathic. And I scored 25. This means I'm hyper-empathic, which makes me the opposite of a psychopath. On the other hand, Professor Kevin Dutton, who's another psychopath expert, I took his test and scored 41%, which is quite high. I covered this on my show on Planet X Radio in those days when I did it. So very interesting, that, very interesting. Now, Michael Shrimpton. Michael, the Germans did it, Shrimpton. He came. It was good to see him again, actually. He's a guy with a sense of humour, he's cool, he's very intelligent. He claims he has an IQ of 187. Oh, well, people who claim to have high IQs, I tend to think, I don't know, maybe they're bragging a bit. But anyway, he did a very interesting talk about mass formation psychosis. This is something that Dr. Moss brought up as well. And he mentions that Boris Johnson's resignation was all to do with a German plot. He sees the EU as a kind of a German entity run by the DVD. That's not something you. It's not something you watch. You put a silver disc, you watch a movie on. That's the German intelligence network. There's been many prime ministers who are German agents, starting with Ted Heath. The European Union was started in 1938 during the Nazi period and was a German plot. The whole Pincher thing, Chris Pincher, you know, the appropriately named sexual assaulter. It's just so apt that he has that name. That was also staged to get rid of Bojo. I'll be saying more about that in my live stream, which I'm going to do when I get home. Just check. I might be getting an urgent message on my phone, which may mean I need to cut off, and I don't necessarily have time to edit that out. Okay. Okay, right. Okay, no problem. The Ukraine is a German-occupied state, and it's about the Ukraine is the reason Putin invaded was because Ukraine was actually they were going to level the Donbass. They were going to invade the Donbass and just kill everyone. I mean, I can well believe that was going to happen. I mean, they've been persecuting the people of Donbass, Luhansk and Donetsk, since 2014, and they spent 8 years shelling and bombing these people. There's criminals in Kiev. Zelensky being the latest of these gangsters. So I can well believe that. There was an assassination attempt on the Japanese Prime Minister. He believes that the Type 21 U-boat, this is the first submarine, at the end of World War II, the Germans invented a submarine that could actually dive and stay dive, didn't need to surface, unlike the earlier ones that had to come up and sit on the surface and recharge their batteries. That was actually designed specifically for transportation. He believes that the Nazis got out at the end of the war. I think that's the one thing I actually agree with him on. Now, Andrea Folks is a medium, and she's been on TV. You might have seen her on TV. She's been on the Kilroy, QVC, this morning with Philip and Fern, and she does past life psychometry. That is, getting psychic messages from inanimate objects. And she's written something called and a TV show she did called Have I Been Here Before, about past lives. Then she started talking about the Illuminati and her TV career was over. But she talks about past lives, and some people have attachments from spirits of their past ancestors, she mentions the Sikh community especially of suffering from this. People can have past lives with different sexes as well. For example, you could be a woman in one life and then a man in the next. But the feminists will hate that. She doesn't believe there's such a thing as a twin flame. I don't know much about the twin flame thing. It's this idea you meet when you fall in love. There's something about your relationship with the person you fall in love with that exists because you two have had multiple lives together, and it's certainly possible you have multiple lives together in different incarnations. And the film Cloud Atlas, which is my favourite movie, is all about that. Yet you may have very different relationships in different ways. I've been told by many psychics I have a very deep soul connection with my mother, who was the person who was my mother in this life, but it could be we had a different relationship in other lives. But we apparently have a very deep soul connection. In this life, she was an extremely destructive person in my life. She treated me very badly, and I wonder if that's to do with something I did in the past. It may be a karmic thing. That something I did in a past life to her. I mean, I don't know. I hope not, but if that's the case, I can't do anything about it now except try to make amends. Maybe what she did was, to me, is a form of that. I don't know. she believes that soap operas promote drama. Yeah, pointless drama. Yeah. She mentions karmic boyfriends. She's had some karmic boyfriends, which could be like people got involved with her. She used the term soul monad to find people like in Cloud Atlas, where there's a group of people who reincarnate. She brought up the patriarchy, which is a bit, you know, whenever I hear that word I go, you know, because evil white men cause all the problems in the world. It's all, she didn't elaborate on her use of that word. She may have a different definition for it. But now, Kerry Murray appeared. Now, he's a young journalist who works for the United Free Press. Now, other people do, including Gemma Cooper, formerly of the BBC, now applying her considerable journalistic talents to truth and reality. Good, well done, Gemma. The United Free Press I think, is a wonderful gift in a world where journalism is. I consider journalism probably several notches down from prostitution and drug dealing. It is literally that disreputable. Most journalists are. And what was that guy say? We just do as we just print we never print the truth. We just print what we're told to print. We're tools of psychological warfare, that kind of thing. Interesting guy. I didn't follow all his talk because I was distracted. I had to do something else, but I'll watch it on Marty's channel. Sandy Adams was back. Sandy Adams is a wonderful woman who writes for The Light, and she talked about the kind of, she gives her assessment of the whole the situation of the basically the deep state and what they're doing. She's a typical post-2016er. There's some wonderful people have come out of that movement, that wake-up call of 2016, and everything that's happened since with the lockdown, the COVID lockdown, which was simply a reaction. It was simply a reaction. I said back in 2016, I said at the time when Trump and Brexit happened, there's going to be a massive backlash against this. She mentions the United Nations. I do recommend a book, incidentally. She didn't mention it, but it's called The Fearful Master by G. Edward Griffin. It's an old book written sometime in the 70s about the United Nations. About how it is an embryonic world government. She talks about the Lucis Trust. Now, this is interesting. There's the Lucis Trust. It's basically the governing body of the United Nations, and it's basically a Luciferian kind of cult. In fact, Blavatsky was involved in that, Helena Blavatsky, and it draws on her work, several others, and there was a prayer room at the UN, which is like non-denominational. The Rockefeller Foundation is also very much behind this. The Rockefeller Foundation appears to be the spider in the web. It's probably the link to the high Illuminati. I talked about in my talk about how in Dorset about how Nikola Tesla had been shut down by the Rockefellers, among others. She talks about Agenda 21, the Club of Rome, George Soros. There's a lot of heatwave fear porn. Now, funny enough, I just check the news. I hardly ever watch the news. It's depressing. It's confusing. It's called lies. And there's talk about how hedgehogs suffer in hot weather, and I mean, it's designed to tug our heartstrings. And there was a time when people would say, "It's summer." it's hot. Why is it hot? Why is it so hot? It's summer. It's probably a little bit hotter now because they probably made HAARP runs and drives from hot air towards northern Europe. But summer is summer. That's all it is. Of course, this is all very well known: smart cities, carbon taxes, the Great Reset, the World Economic Foundation, overpopulation. Apparently, this program, the Population Bomb by Paul Ehrlich, this came out in the in the 60s, and it was like predicting that there wouldn't be enough food by 1980 because there'd be too many people in the world. Things that never came true. It all goes back to Thomas Malthus, who was a 19th century philosopher, and he alerted people to the fact that the world's population was increasing, and eventually we'd run out of space and resources. I think this was very influential, this book. It kind of, I think, may have inspired the film which I've made a video about before called Soylent Green. And the Club of Rome, David Icke has referred to this. The Club of Rome, when it was first founded in 1968, came to the conclusion that at some point nuclear weapons and things like that wouldn't be enough. Having an external enemy such as the Soviet Union would fail, and indeed it did, didn't it? By the late 1980s, it was all over. Yeah, they said, well, what the best thing to do is like make the environment the primary concern, and this is where the whole carbon thing comes from. You know, carbon dioxide causes climate change, and that bollocks. So they say, well, essentially this turns the enemy of humanity and the world into humanity itself. Mankind is the enemy of mankind. We are our own worst enemies, and this is the kind of self-hatred you get. It's not unlike the critical race theory, you know, hatred, which encourages white people to hate themselves and men to hate themselves even more. Straight white men to hate themselves even more, and of course non-white people and women and homosexuals to hate others. I mean, I don't know. Is it worse to hate yourself or other people? I don't know. Can't work that out. I think they're both very awful. It's a terrible dilemma, I think. So the enemy of the world becomes humanity itself. Hence, the Georgia Guidestones, again put up in 1980 in this post Club of Rome world. Maintain humanity under 500 million. Yes. She mentions this a very alarming document that's appeared. It's actually a military intelligence document that describes the population. It goes by the census of 2011, where I think there were 65 million people in the country, and then they made a forward projection to 2025, and they said we expect there to be 14 million people in the country by 2025. Which in 14 years we're supposed to go from 65 million to 14 million. How's that supposed to happen? Makes you wonder what this mass medication campaign was all about, doesn't it? She mentions ClimateGate. This was basically the University of East Anglia was caught red-handed. I'm glad to say she mentions Yuval Noah Harari. Now this guy's come on the scene quite recently. He's an Israeli scientist and philosopher who he's a kind of younger Klaus Schwab, and he's been making a lot of noise in the World Economic Forum lately, and he's quite a sinister person. He actually says, you know, what are we going to do with useless people and things? There's going to be a lot of useless people in the world. What are we going to do with them? Things like that. And he's a very sinister individual, kind of a young Klaus Schwab. Yeah. Klaus Schwab's family is very interesting, incidentally. He's from a scientific industrial background, all Nazi collaborators. He was born in 1938 to a family that were doing on a contract for the SS, things like that. She mentions, oh God, I just wish Ian Crane was still alive right now. She mentions the NHS. I was glad she brought up the NHS because the NHS has gone down this path as well. Another reason to be glad I'm out of the bad bastard. Yes, there's something called digital improvement at the NHS, and we all know about that. Remember that opt-out, not opt-in medical records database they sent around saying, we're going to put all your medical records on the database. It'll be perfectly secure, don't you worry. We know they've said that before and things have been hacked, but you're supposed to trust them. And indeed, and they said you've got to opt out, not opt in. So we'll assume you've given your consent unless you actually say you don't want it done. So very interesting talk there by Sandy Adams, great lady, really good to see her again. I asked her about the Georgia Guidestone, she said yeah, she cheered. I went up and spoke to her privately and we had a good laugh about the Georgia Guidestones. Well, whoever did that, well done. I'd like to shake their hand. The final speaker was Karen Dodd, who runs the Freedom Network, who's co-organiser of this event with Miles. She's doing her own conference at Glastonbury in September. I might be able to attend that, I'll have to see. But she's a workhorse when it comes to organising local communities to do things like grow food. She's one of these kind of like peaceful non-compliance is the solution individuals, and indeed I think she's right there. it'll take a lot of work to organise local communities, especially when you consider Gloria Moss's assessment. How many NFs have you got in your community? I don't know I don't know any NFs. Well, I mean, I don't know who's done the Myers-Briggs personality, but I don't know anyone apart from a few people who actually would, who actually would. I've got a message. Sorry, I'm just doing live updates here. Oh yeah. So the question is, what do you there are certain people, NPCs, people, the pseudo psychopaths, whatever you want to call them, who won't cooperate. But as long as you can find people in your local area who are on your side, you'll be okay. And I know some of these people. One of them is a lady who runs a health food shop in Oxford, and this is the perfect person to be involved in this kind of thing. So that, I think, is so Karen's a practical person. She's an activist. She's actually seeking real solutions, and but despite that, she still is a theorist. She's still involved. She teaches yoga, things like that. She's a spiritual person as well. So that's the kind of perfect combination, really. I like, people who get too bogged down with the sort of this world reality can sometimes become. It can become overwhelming. You develop almost a crust over the top of yourself, which stops you getting involved with other things. I know people like that. And of course, the opposite, of course, is the excessively yin, feminine, kind of detached type of person. When I say feminine, this is not about male or female. It's simply personality traits. The person who becomes ungrounded, loses touch with reality. So. I respect her, a lot of respect to her for that. I mean, you heard, obviously, I've interviewed her, so you've hopefully heard her interview, which I did. It's been a great conference, great speakers. It's a shame we didn't get Professor Valentina Sokova, but we picked it up and carried on with it. The show went on. We adapted. In a play, if something goes wrong, if one of the actors drops dead on stage, for example, you just improvise. And we improvised very well. Miles, Karen, and everyone else involved in this kept things going, and they did an excellent job. And I'd like to say a big thank you to both of them for what they've done, and indeed, and for everyone else involved in this, the speakers, and of course the delegates. It wouldn't be anything without the delegates, would it? And there was different numbers. They came and went during the weekend. Some days that there was almost like people standing around sides. It was like Christmas. It was like the Christmas basis again. Other times, there was only a handful of people in the seats, but there was a continuous flow of people, and everyone was very appreciative of what was going on. People had their criticisms, they had their disagreements. These got quite fiery at times, but generally, the general atmosphere of this conference has been a good one, and I've enjoyed it thoroughly. The weather has been gorgeous. Too hot, if anything, and I look forward to many future events like this. I don't have the details, but apparently Miles is already working on the next Bases conference, which I think is going to be before the end of the year. I'll keep you posted on that. Well, sure, he will keep you posted on that. So I don't have all the details now, but fingers crossed that will happen. Thank you very much. That's the end of my assessment of the speakers. Of course, all that remains now is souvenirs. So what have we got here? Well, there's my moisturiser. FT, of course. I've got two FTs. I read all that one, and I'm sort of halfway through this one. This is the earlier one. That's the box which I got a new phone. It's a very nice one. The other one I got was quite new, but it just didn't. It wasn't actually very effective. Now these are the. I bought 7 of these from Bob Wood's stall. There we go. Prudence Calabresi, George Knapp, Edgar Fouché, Dr. Carter Turner, Jim Mars, Alec Newell, then the MJ12 panel. That was quite difficult decisions to make there because there were so many. But I made a good decision. I got some good ones there, definitely. I'm missing something. I'm missing something. Where is it? Where is that? All right. Okay. There was don't worry, there was something else, so I haven't found it yet. But I got a mouse mat as well from his stall. So that's that there. And now these are Celtic collection, hot chocolate drink. Oh, these are that's a present from my Welsh friends, Leanne and Mike. That's my notebook, which I've almost filled up now. Now that's Nexus is in there. I haven't actually opened it yet because I haven't had a chance to read it, but that's Nexus magazine. I'll read that at some point. This is my principal reading book, which I haven't read. Richard Dolan's UFOs and the National Security State. I bought that in Probe, forward by Jacques Vallée. It's very difficult to get in this country, actually, but Tony Topping had it on his store. Oh, you saw that, I think, at Probe. That is my phone charger, my old phone charger. I've got a new one now, and that is my camera charger. Let's have a look here. Now this is Sandra de Roy's book, which is some cases go beyond walk-in case. That artwork was done by quite a famous artist, and there you can see. You can pause and read this, but that looks quite good. That's another thing to read. This is an advert for something called Questioning Science. There's a number of these events. Mark Devlin's in it. Gloria Moss. Harry Rhodes. You recognise these names? Yeah. Brilliant. That's my audio player. That's my toothbrush. And that's my earphones for the audio player. That is one pen. That's a new pen I've got because the old one ran out. And that is another new pen, which is red, which I can use that for cancelling things. Look what I got here. I got this. UFO Mega Conference. That was given to me by Bob Wood, the organiser. There we go. It's and those are my souvenirs, ladies and gents. Well, it's an absolutely beautiful Monday morning here at the Basis Project headquarters. It's about 8:30. The sun is already up. It's promising to be a hot day. I like these new furniture Mars has got in his garden. They're really nice. Really nice furniture in his garden. Now, I'm hopefully going to be able to go for breakfast with a friend from the conference who's still in the area. But I just wanted to show you something, right? You know, people have a go at Miles all the time and they say horrible things about him. They really do. They slag him off no end. But Miles has got a heart of gold, and I've got the proof here. Look at this. Firstly, let me show you. We're in this conservatory here. Lots of glass panels. Open door, and look what Miles has here. The glass and piece of paper. Miles Johnston likes to save the lives of insects that are trapped inside his conservatory. Now that, to me, shows a remarkable level of sweetness and compassion, I think. So well done, Miles. I'm now sitting in the Basis Project garden. They get round, and here's the familiar backs of the houses you've seen before. That's the room I was sleeping in up there, and it's just such a lovely. I'm here with Miles. Here is enjoying himself, relaxing, and I'm sitting on these nice.
Enjoying myself.
You just look like you are. He's sleeping off the adrenaline of the last couple of days, and relaxing now. So we're now enjoying the chemtrail-free, cloud-free sky, and there's growth on the trees. You can see it. Look, you see it like stretching up there to the sun. Yeah. So forget the climate change fear porn and the heat wave kind of like horror that always accompanies in the news. Whenever there was a time when people just called this summer. Now it's we've got to be. What about the hedgehogs and things like that? So just enjoy it, guys. That's the thing to do. As long as it lasts. When it comes to winter, you know, you remember this period very fondly. It's only like in the middle of summer people complain about it, when it's actually there. Maybe it's part of being British, but you know, we're never satisfied with our weather, are we? We always got to complain about it, wherever it is. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to just sit back and relax. I'm going to meet with a friend for breakfast, and Miles has very generously offered to drive me half the way home, which is great, and so we can put the world to rights on the journey, I'm sure. All right. See you later, guys.
Well, we have to invent several conspiracy theories and boogeymen now so we can discuss them.
Oh, yeah, as if there aren't enough real ones. Yeah, I'm sure we've got.
Why don't we elect Boris Johnson for Prime Minister? Oh, that's already happened.
Yes, and shamed as I am, I actually was a contributing part in that, and
so was I.
Yeah.
Yeah, so was I.
But I did like him, you know. Yeah.
Absolute crook.
I know. Well, we all make mistakes, Miles, don't we?
A bunch of crooks.
Yeah. Well, you know, to be honest, I mean, I like it's a sign of the times, I suppose. But you know, because there's I mean, Kemi Badenoch, a black woman, is now in a position where she might lead the country. And that's a sign of the times, I suppose, with the immigration and stuff like that. But bloody hell, she's based. She's by far the best candidate of all. She's kind of like Candace Owens. I love her. I absolutely adore her, and I want her to win. But so we'll see what happens. But unfortunately, I think she's too good to ever be Prime Minister under this system. They'll find some way to undermine her, like they tried to do Trump. But God, yeah, it'd be wonderful if she wins. But maybe with the blowing up, just a thought, right? I'll bring this up in the live stream. With the blowing up of the Georgia Guidestones, are we now on a different timeline where 2016 is going to come back? Kemi Badenoch's going to be Prime Minister, and she's going to reverse all the bullshit crap that the globalists have been putting in, and I don't want to get my hopes too high. Anyway, guys, this is from Miles and myself. We're signing off. Guys, another reason to hope Kemi Badenoch wins the election, wins the selection, whatever it is, and becomes the next Prime Minister. Just imagine Diane Abbott's face. Just imagine what she'll say. Just imagine the fire she will spit. Her lifetime ambition. I wanted to be the first black woman Prime Minister. And I'm a left-wing liberal, open border socialist globalist. Instead it's this horrible Tory fascist. Oh God, yeah, I think the left generally have an absolute meltdown. For the same reason that generally as Diane Abbott if Kemi Badenoch was Prime Minister. Oh yeah, I think it'd be worth it just for that, actually. Okay, viewers, a slight update on what's been happening. As you may notice, I'm not actually in the Miles mobile right now. I'm actually in another friend of mine, and she's given me a lift instead of Miles. Miles is not feeling too good. I think he's basically crashed out. He's after all the energy he's expended. So I'm actually going to Reading with somebody else. It's very nice of this person to take me. So, Miles, if you're watching this, I hope you feel better soon. Take care. Alright, everyone, I'm at Reading Station, and I'm sitting there now waiting for a train to go home, which is going to arrive in about 10 minutes' time, and I feel awful. I feel awful all of a sudden. It's like some kind of hangover. It's horrible. I'm suddenly like, I'm thinking about what I'm going to do. Go home, get ready to work tomorrow, deal with my housemates. I've got to feed my daughter's cat. It's what I do every day, but it suddenly feels unbearable. I didn't think I'd feel like this way. I thought I was getting over these post-conference blues, but I haven't. It struck me I was going into the station. It's when they struck me. I've got to go back to the bloody normal world. Oh man, I have to like put on an act and pretend to be someone I'm not really. I've got to. Well, I don't have to, but if I didn't, I'd look really weird. I'd probably lose half my jobs. So that's my next stop, I think. That's what I'm going to do. Anyway, it's been a great conference though. I mean, if that's why I feel the way I do now, is because it's been so good. Anyway, that's my train's coming soon on that platform there. Hello everyone, well I'm home. Yes, I'm now back in my home. I have arrived back. I have let everyone know I'm back. And I now have to readjust to Normiville. It's not easy, but well, that's because, as I said, it's because it was such a good conference. I sold 5 books, which is not bad. Including all but one of my Revealeds, which is pretty good. One lady bought a copy of Revealed. I told her she should read Rising first, but she insisted. I want Revealed, so the customer is always right. So she gave me £10, I signed a book and handed it over to her. I want to say a big thank you to everyone, like all my friends. And some people have remotely been giving me a lot of moral support as well, and I appreciate them too. And I want to say thanks to everyone who made this conference happen. It's been fantastic, and I can't wait for the next one. So, with that being said, I better get on with it. Thank you all for watching Her Panwo TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order.